Destroy 1. The radio kept broadcasting my voice, but I wasn't at the microphone. Let me back up. My name is Ethan Cross, and for 3 summers running 2019 through 2021, I worked as a fire lookout for the Forest Service in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in southern Washington state. If you've never done lookout work, it's about as solitary as a job gets. You spend 4 to 6 months alone in a tower perched on some remote peak, scanning the horizon for smoke, recording weather data, and maintaining radio contact with dispatch. The pay isn't spectacular, around $32,000 a year, but it comes with free housing, incredible views, and the kind of silence most people never experience in their entire lives. I loved it. The tower I was assigned to sat at the summit of Bear Mountain, elevation 6,183 feet, accessible only by a 4-mile hiking trail that climbed 2,800 vertical feet from the trailhead. No road access. Everything I needed for the season, food, propane, batteries, books, had to be packed in on my back or brought up by pack mules in early June when the snow finally cleared enough to make the trail passable. The tower itself was a classic 14 by 14-foot cab mounted on a 40-foot steel frame, surrounded by a catwalk with waist-high railings. Inside I had an Osborne firefinder for triangulating smoke locations, weather instruments, a 2-way radio, a propane stove, a narrow cot, and not much else. The incident I'm about to describe happened during my 3rd season, in late August of 2021. By that point in the summer, I'd been up there for 11 weeks straight. I knew every ridge, every drainage, every lightning strike snag within a 30-mile radius. I knew how the light changed throughout the day, how the wind pattern shifted with the weather, and how sounds carried differently depending on temperature and humidity. I was comfortable up there, confident. That confidence didn't last. It started on August 23rd, 2021, around 9:30 in the morning. I was sitting at the firefinder, drinking my 2nd cup of coffee, French press, dark roast, the only luxury I insisted on, and scanning the western quadrant like I did every morning. The sky was clear except for some high cirrus clouds to the north, and the air had that late summer crispness that meant fall wasn't far off. Wind was calm, maybe 3 to 5 miles per hour out of the southwest. Perfect visibility. The radio crackled. Bear Mountain lookout, this is dispatch. Radio check. Over. I reached for the handset mounted on the wall above the desk. Dispatch, Bear Mountain. I read you 5 by 5. Over. Copy that, Bear Mountain. Weather report when you get a chance. We've got a front moving in tomorrow. Trying to get a sense of conditions up high. Over. Roger. Dispatch. Current conditions. Clear skies. Visibility unlimited. Wind southwest at 3 to 5. Temperature 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure 30.1 to 2. And rising. No smoke visible in any quadrant. Over. Good copy, Bear Mountain. Stay sharp out there. Dispatch out. Standard morning exchange. I'd done it 100 times. I set the handset back in its cradle, topped off my coffee, and walked out onto the catwalk to check the anemometer. The wind gauge was spinning lazily, confirming my visual estimate. I made a note in my log, a spiral-bound notebook where I recorded everything. Weather observations, smoke reports, wildlife sightings, helicopter traffic, even the occasional hiker who made it all the way up to say hello. That's when I heard my voice, coming from inside the tower. Not exactly my voice. It was close, but wrong. Like listening to a recording of yourself and realizing you don't sound the way you think you do. The pitch was off, maybe a half step too high, and the cadence was just slightly too slow, like someone doing an impression without quite nailing the rhythm. I stepped back inside. The voice was coming from the radio speaker. Barometric pressure 30.1 to 2 and rising. No smoke visible in any quadrant. Over. It was my weather report. The exact same words I'd just said, maybe 30 seconds ago. But I was standing 6 feet away from the radio. The handset was in its cradle. I wasn't transmitting. My first thought was echo or feedback. Some weird technical glitch. Maybe my transmission had bounced off something and looped back. I'd heard stories about atmospheric conditions causing strange radio behavior ducting, skip propagation, that kind of thing. It didn't make sense that I'd hear my own voice played back on the same frequency, but I'm not a radio engineer. I waited. Silence. Just the usual static hiss of an open channel. Then, dispatch Bear Mountain. I read you 5 by 5. Over. My voice again. Or something close to it. This time I was certain I hadn't said those words. That was from earlier in the conversation, the response I'd given to the initial radio check. The handset was still in its cradle. I checked the transmit button, not pressed. I checked the power switch. The radio was on, receiving mode only. Good copy, Bear Mountain. Stay sharp out there. Dispatch out. That was the dispatcher's voice, clear as day, repeating the sign-off from a minute ago. Then my voice. Roger. Dispatch. Current conditions. Clear skies. I grabbed the handset and keyed the transmit button, cutting off the playback. Dispatch. This is Bear Mountain. Do you copy? Over. A pause. Then the dispatcher's voice, sounding confused. Bear Mountain. Dispatch. I copy. We just talked 30 seconds ago. Everything okay up there? Over. Dispatch. I'm getting some kind of feedback or echo on this frequency. Are you hearing anything unusual on your end? Over. Negative, Bear Mountain. Your signal's coming through clean. No echo, no interference. What are you hearing? Over. I hesitated. How do I explain this? Dispatch. I'm hearing recordings. My own transmission's playing back to me. It's like the radio's repeating our conversation from a minute ago. Over. Another pause. Longer this time. Bear Mountain. That's unusual. Could be a stuck relay somewhere in the system, or maybe someone's got a recorder hooked up and accidentally broadcasting. I'm not showing any other traffic on this frequency. Can you switch to the backup radio and see if the problem persists? Over. The backup radio. I'd almost forgotten about it. Every lookout had 2 radios. In case one failed, a primary and a backup, both mounted on the same shelf. I powered down the primary unit and switched on the backup, watching the green power indicator glow to life. Dispatch. Bear Mountain on backup radio. How do you read? Over. Loud and clear, Bear Mountain. Any change? Over. I listened. Nothing but clean static. Negative. Dispatch. Backup seems fine. I'll keep an eye on the primary and let you know if... My voice from the primary radio speaker, even though it was powered off. Negative. Dispatch. Backup seems fine. The hair on my arm stood up. Dispatch. Did you copy that? Over. My hand was shaking slightly as I held the handset. Copy what, Bear Mountain? I heard you say the backup's working fine. That's all. Over. So the dispatcher didn't hear it. Only me. Roger. Dispatch. Never mind. Bear Mountain out. I set down the handset and stared at the primary radio. The power indicator was dark. The unit was definitely off. But I could still hear faint static coming from its speaker, and underneath that static, something else. A low hum, almost subsonic, that I felt more than heard. I unplugged the primary radio from the wall. The cigarette lighter-style DC plug pulled free with a soft click. The static continued. So did the hum. That's not possible. No power, no sound. Basic physics. I picked up the radio. It was surprisingly heavy, maybe 8 pounds with the battery backup, and examined it. The battery compartment was empty. I'd removed the batteries weeks ago because they were corroded and I didn't need them with reliable solar panels charging the main battery bank. No external power, no internal batteries, but the speaker was definitely producing sound. I did what any rational person would do. I walked outside, crossed the catwalk, and hurled the radio as far as I could into the forest below. It tumbled through the air, struck a tree trunk about halfway down the slope, and disappeared into the underbrush with a distant crash. I watched the spot where it landed, breathing hard, feeling ridiculous and terrified in equal measure. Silence. Just whined through the pines and the faint call of a raven somewhere downslope. I went back inside and tried to focus on normal tasks. I recorded the temperature and humidity at 10 a.m., exactly as scheduled. I ate lunch, peanut butter and honey, on wheat bread, an apple, a handful of almonds. I read a chapter of the book I was working through, some thriller about a conspiracy I couldn't concentrate on. Every few minutes, I glanced at the backup radio, making sure it was still quiet. It was. By 2 p.m., I'd almost convinced myself the whole thing had been a one-time glitch, maybe even a minor hallucination brought on by isolation or dehydration or too much caffeine. I'd heard that extended solitude could mess with your head. Maybe this was my breaking point. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. The tower stairs were metal, open grate construction, and they rang like a bell when you climbed them. 40 feet of steel treads. each step producing a distinct metallic clang that echoed off the rocks below. You couldn't climb those stairs quietly. Every visitor announced themselves long before they reached the top. These footsteps were deliberate and measured. Clang, clang, clang. Someone was coming up. I looked at my log. No hikers scheduled. No resupply due. Fire season was winding down, and I hadn't seen another human being in 12 days. I walked to the door and opened it. The catwalk was empty. The stairs were empty. But I could still hear the footsteps, clearer now, coming from below. Clang, clang, clang. I leaned over the railing and looked straight down the stairwell. Nobody there. Just switchback after switchback of empty steel descending to the rocky ground 40 feet below. The footsteps stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard my own breathing, harsh and fast. Then I heard something else. My own breathing, coming from inside the tower, slightly delayed, like an echo with a half-second lag. I spun around. The door to the tower was open. I could see straight through to the interior of the desk, the firefinder, the backup radio on its shelf, empty. But I could hear someone breathing in there. My own rhythm, my own pattern, perfectly synchronized except for that half-second delay. I stepped back inside, and the breathing stopped. Silence again. I was starting to understand that silence wasn't really silence up here anymore. It was the space between repetitions, the pause before the next playback. The afternoon stretched into evening. I forced myself to maintain my routine. Weather observation at 4 p.m. Dinner at 6, freeze-dried beef, stroganoff, reconstituted with boiling water, crushed crackers, a chocolate bar. I watched the sunset paint the western peaks in shades of orange and pink, the same view I'd watched dozens of times, now tainted with unease. At 7:45 p.m., right before dark, the backup radio crackled. Bear Mountain, this is dispatch. Evening check-in. Over. I grabbed the handset. Dispatch, Bear Mountain. All quiet here. No smoke, no weather changes. Winds died down to nothing. Over. Roger. Bear Mountain. How's that radio situation? Primary still acting up? Over. I glanced at the empty shelf where the primary radio had been. Negative. Dispatch. I resolved the issue. Backup's working fine. Over. Good to hear. We've got that front moving in overnight. Expect possible thunderstorms after midnight. Keep an eye out for lightning strikes. Over. Will do, dispatch. Bear Mountain out. I set the handset down and immediately heard my own voice from the empty shelf. Will do, dispatch. Bear Mountain out. I closed my eyes. Took a breath. This was real. This was happening. The voice continued. Negative, dispatch. I resolved the issue. Then the dispatcher's voice, exactly as it had sounded moments ago. Good to hear. We've got that front moving in overnight. The entire conversation, playing back from a radio that was at the bottom of a ravine 300 yards away. I grabbed my flashlight, a heavy mag light that took 3 D-cell batteries, and went outside. The sun had set, and the forest below was already deep in shadow. I switched on the flashlight and swept the beam across the slope where I'd thrown the radio. Nothing. Just trees and underbrush and the glint of granite outcroppings. I went back inside and wedged the door shut with a chair. It wouldn't stop anyone from entering, but it would at least make noise if the door moved. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the desk with the flashlight in my lap and the logbook open in front of me, recording everything that happened. Every sound, every repetition, every impossible occurrence. I told myself that documentation was important, that if I wrote it all down, it would make sense later, that someone would read this and understand. At 11:30 p.m., the footsteps started again. This time they came from above. I looked up at the ceiling, rough-cut planks, nailed to timber joists, barely 6.5 feet above the floor. There was no space up there for a person. Just rafters and insulation and the underside of the roof. But the footsteps were clear. Back and forth across the ceiling, directly overhead, the same measured pace as before. The planks creaked with each step, bowing slightly under weight that shouldn't exist. I stood up. The footsteps stopped. I sat down. They resumed. This went on for 20 minutes. Every time I stood, silence. Every time I sat, footsteps. At midnight, the storm arrived. The first drops of rain hit the windows like thrown gravel, and within minutes it was a full downpour. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the interior of the tower in brief, harsh flashes. Thunder followed, deep and rolling, echoing off the mountainside. I should have been watching for strikes. That was my job. Lightning plus dry forest equals fire. But I couldn't look away from the ceiling, couldn't stop tracking those impossible footsteps pacing back and forth above my head. Then my voice, shouting from outside, "Help me! Somebody help me!" I jumped up so fast the chair tipped over backward. That was my voice, screaming, terrified, coming from somewhere on the catwalk. "Please! It won't stop! Make it stop!" I grabbed the flashlight and yanked the chair away from the door, threw it open. Rain lashed across the catwalk, driven almost horizontal by the wind. Lightning flashed, and in that instant of white light I saw everything with perfect clarity. The empty catwalk, the rain-slicked railings, the forest below thrashing in the storm. Nobody there. "Help me!" The voice was coming from the stairs. I ran to the railing and shone the flashlight down. At the bottom of the stairs, just barely visible in the rain, was a figure in a dark jacket and jeans. My jacket, my jeans, the same clothes I was wearing. It was me, or something that looked exactly like me. It was staring up at the tower, mouth open, screaming my words. "Make it stop! Please!" Lightning flashed again, closer this time, and in that split second of illumination I saw its face clearly. It was my face, my features, my hair, but the expression was wrong. Mouth stretched too wide, eyes too empty, like a mask pulled tight over something else. Then darkness, and when the next flash came, it was gone. I stood there in the rain, flashlight beam cutting through the downpour, searching. Nothing. Just empty stairs and wet rocks and trees bent in the wind. I backed into the tower and slammed the door, wedged the chair under the knob again. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the flashlight. The storm continued through the night. Thunder, lightning, rain hammering the roof. And underneath it all, the constant playback, my voice reading weather reports, my footsteps on the stairs, my breathing, my conversations with dispatch, everything I'd said and done for the past 24 hours, looping endlessly from sources that didn't exist. At 3:15 a.m., the backup radio came to life. "Bear Mountain, this is dispatch. Emergency traffic, how copy? Over." I grabbed the handset. "Dispatch, Bear Mountain, I copy. What's your emergency? Over." Static. Then, "Bear Mountain, we've lost contact with you. You haven't responded to radio checks for 6 hours. Are you okay? Over." I looked at my watch. 3:17 a.m. The last time I talked to dispatch was the 7:45 p.m. check-in. That was 7.5 hours ago. "Dispatch, I'm fine. I've been here the whole time. This is the first I'm hearing from you since evening check-in. Over." Silence. Long silence. Then, "Bear Mountain, we've been calling you every hour since 2100 hours. No response. We were about to send a helicopter at first light. What's going on up there? Over." I didn't know how to answer that. How do you explain that your own voice has been drowning out every incoming call, that something is mimicking you, that the radio you threw off a cliff is still broadcasting? "Dispatch, I'm experiencing equipment malfunctions and other issues. Request early extraction. Over." Another pause. "Define other issues, Bear Mountain. Over." I stopped. What could I say that wouldn't make me sound insane? "Dispatch, I need to come down as soon as possible. Over." "Roger, Bear Mountain. We can have a helicopter to you at 0700 if weather permits. Can you make it until then?" Over. I looked around the tower. The footsteps had stopped. The phantom voices had quieted. For the moment, everything was still. "Affirmative. Dispatch. I'll be ready at 0700. Over." "Hang in there, Ethan. Dispatch out." The sound of my first name, something the dispatcher rarely used, almost broke me. I sat at the desk and waited for dawn. The storm passed around 4 a.m. By 5, the sky was starting to lighten in the east. By 6, I had everything packed: sleeping bag, clothes, toiletries, logbook. I left the food, the propane, all the government equipment. I just wanted out. At 6:45 a.m., I heard the helicopter. The distinctive thump, thump, thump of rotor blades echoed off the peaks, getting closer. I grabbed my pack and went outside. The air was clean and cold after the storm, the forest below still dripping with rainwater. Everything looked normal in the early morning light. Beautiful, even. The helicopter appeared over the eastern ridge. A Bell 206 inches, Forest Service, green and white. It circled once, then settled into a hover above the small clearing 30 yards from the tower where they'd dropped off supplies in June. I started down the stairs. Clang, clang, clang. My boots on the metal treads, loud in the morning quiet. I was halfway down when I realized the helicopter sound had stopped. I looked up. The sky was empty. No helicopter, no rotor wash bending the trees. Just silence. But I could still hear it. That distinctive thump, thump, thump coming from behind me. I turned around. The helicopter was sitting on top of the tower. That's impossible. The tower roof couldn't support that kind of weight. The whole structure would collapse. But there it was, rotors spinning, perched on the 40-foot steel frame like a bird on a branch. Then I saw the pilot. It was me. In my jacket, my jeans, my face pressed against the helicopter's window, staring down at me. I ran down the stairs, 3 steps at a time, nearly falling twice. Hit the ground and kept running, straight into the forest. No trail, no plan, just away. Branches whipped my face. Roots grabbed at my boots. I didn't care. I crashed through underbrush, slid down muddy slopes, splashed through a creek I didn't remember being there. Behind me, the helicopter sound followed. Not fading, not getting closer, just there. Constant, impossible. I ran for what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes. Finally, I broke out onto the actual trail, the proper 4-mile path that led down to the trailhead and the parking area where I'd left my truck back in June. The trail was empty. No other hikers. No sound except my own ragged breathing and the distant helicopter that wasn't really there. I walked fast, almost jogging, following the switchbacks down through old-growth forest. The trail was muddy from last night's rain, and I could see fresh boot prints in the soft earth. My boot prints leading down the trail ahead of me. I stopped, looked behind me. No prints coming up the trail, just the ones leading down. Something wearing my boots had walked this trail recently, maybe minutes ago, maybe while I was running blind through the forest. I followed the prints. They led me down through the switchbacks, past the mile marker signs, past the creek crossing where I usually stopped to filter water. 2 miles. 3 miles. The prints never deviated from the trail. At the 3.5-mile mark, I found my truck. It was parked on the trail itself, 30 yards from the actual trailhead parking area. Doors open, engine running, headlights on in broad daylight. I approached slowly. The boot prints led right up to the driver's side door. I looked inside. The interior was normal. My registration in the glove box, my sunglasses on the dashboard, empty coffee cups in the cup holders. Everything exactly as I'd left it 11 weeks ago, except for, the radio. My primary radio, the one I'd thrown off the tower, sat on the passenger seat. It was clean. No scratches from hitting the tree, no mud from landing in the underbrush, just sitting there, power indicator glowing green. The speaker crackled. Bear Mountain Lookout, this is dispatch, radio check, over. My hand moved before my brain caught up. I grabbed the handset. Dispatch, this is Ethan Cross. I'm off the mountain. I'm at the trailhead, over. Silence. Then, Ethan, this is dispatch. We show you still on Bear Mountain. Helicopters inbound to your location now. ETA 5 minutes. Do you copy? Over. I looked up. Through the windshield, through the trees, I could see the tower. I was standing at the trailhead, 3.5 miles from the summit, but when I looked up, I was looking at the tower from directly below. That's not possible. The perspective was wrong. The angle was wrong. Dispatch, what's my location showing on your end? Over. You're at Bear Mountain Lookout, coordinates 46.2138 north, 121.8842 west. Same as always. Over. Those were the tower coordinates, not the trailhead. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. I looked at the radio. The green power light pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Dispatch, I need you to listen carefully. I am not at the tower. I am at the trailhead. My truck is here. The trail is here. I can see the parking area. Over. A long pause. Then a different voice, older, authoritative. Ethan, this is District Ranger Paulson. I need you to stay calm. We're showing some irregularities in your transmissions. The helicopter pilot reports he can see you standing on the tower catwalk. Can you confirm your visual? Over. I looked up again. Through the windshield, I saw the tower catwalk. I saw myself standing on it, looking down. If you're listening to this, and you work for the Forest Service, or you're thinking about working as a fire lookout, I need you to understand something. The voice was coming from the radio. My voice. But I wasn't speaking. I've been trying to leave Bear Mountain for 3 days. Every trail leads back to the tower. Every road ends at the stairs. Every helicopter brings me right back to the catwalk. I can see the forest below. I can see other mountains. But I can't reach them. I dropped the handset. The last real conversation I had was August 23rd, 2021 at 9:30 a.m. Everything after that, I don't know what's real anymore. The dispatcher sounds real. The helicopter looks real. This truck feels real. I was backing away from the vehicle now, hands up, like it might bite, but I'm starting to think I never made it off the mountain. I think I'm still up there. I think I've been up there the whole time, and everything else, the helicopter, the truck, the trail, even this transmission is just an echo, just playback. The radio went silent. I stood there in the morning sunlight, on a trail that should lead to civilization, next to a truck that should take me home, and I understood. I ran back up the trail. 4 miles, 2,800 vertical feet. I ran the whole way. My lungs burned. My legs cramped. I didn't stop. When I reached the tower, the real helicopter was there, just landing in the clearing. The real District Ranger Paulson was climbing out, radio in hand. He saw me, and his face went white. Ethan, how did we just saw you. You were on the radio. I pushed past him and climbed the stairs. Clang, clang, clang. At the top, standing on the catwalk, I looked down at the forest. There was my truck, half a mile away through the trees, doors still open, engine still running. There was the trail leading down through the switchbacks. There was another version of me, standing next to the truck, looking up at the tower. Ranger Paulson's voice crackled from his radio. Dispatch, we have a situation at Bear Mountain. Request additional units, and, I don't know, just send everyone. I went inside the tower, sat down at the desk, opened my logbook. The last entry was dated August 23rd, 2021, 9:45 a.m. Everything after that 3 days of notes, observations, recordings of the incidents was blank. The backup radio crackled. Bear Mountain Lookout, this is dispatch, radio check, over. I reached for the handset. My hand passed through it. I tried again. Same result. No substance. No contact. Ranger Paulson climbed the stairs and found me sitting there. He looked at me like I was a ghost. Ethan, we need to get you out of here. Medical evaluation, debriefing, the whole thing. Can you walk? I tried to stand. My legs worked. I followed him to the door. On the catwalk, I looked down at the helicopter. The pilot was staring up at us, talking rapidly into his headset. I took one step onto the stairs. Clang. Everything reset. I was sitting at the desk, coffee cup in hand, scanning the western quadrant. The radio crackled. Bear Mountain Lookout. This is dispatch. Radio check. Over. I know what you're thinking. You want to know how this story ends, how I got out, what the explanation is. I don't have one. What I do have is advice, and you need to listen carefully. If you work in a fire lookout, and your radio starts broadcasting your own voice when you're not transmitting, don't investigate, don't troubleshoot, don't assume it's a technical glitch. Get off the mountain immediately. Don't pack your gear. Don't wait for official extraction. Don't follow protocol. Just walk down the trail and don't look back. Don't trust the helicopter if it comes. Don't trust the ranger if he appears. Don't trust your own truck if you find it where it shouldn't be. Keep walking until you hit a paved road, then keep going until you reach a town with people who don't know your name. And whatever you do, don't try to make sense of it. Don't document it. Don't write it down. Because once you start trying to understand what's happening, once you start creating a record of the impossible, you're giving it structure. You're making it real. And if it becomes real enough, it won't let you leave. I'm still here on Bear Mountain. 11 weeks turns into 11 months, turns into 11 years. The seasons change outside my windows. The trees grow. Snow falls and melts. Hikers occasionally make it up the trail, and I watch them from the catwalk, and sometimes they wave and I wave back, and they never know that the person they're waving to has been standing in this exact spot since August 23rd, 2021. The radio still works. I still file weather reports. Dispatch still responds. Sometimes they send new lookouts up here. I watch them arrive, full of excitement and plans. I watch them discover the same things I discovered. I watch them try to leave. Most of them make it. Their terror is immediate enough, their rejection of the impossible strong enough, that they can still find the trail that leads down. But some of them, the ones like me, the ones who try to understand, who document, who look for patterns, they stay. I can see them sometimes in the other towers scattered across the mountain range, distant figures standing on distant catwalks, watching the horizon, filing reports that dispatch receives but never questions. We're all still doing our jobs. We're all still watching for smoke. And the radio keeps broadcasting our voices even when we're not at the microphone. Story 2. My partner walked past the truck 3 times, each time wearing a different jacket. I need to explain how I know that's impossible. My name is Trevor Hammond, and I've worked as a land surveyor for the past 14 years, the last 7 of those with Appalachian Survey Solutions out of Boone, North Carolina. If you don't know what land surveyors do, we're the people who establish legal property boundaries, mark elevation points, and create accurate maps of terrain for construction projects, land sales, and forestry management. It's methodical work that requires precision, patience, and a lot of walking through difficult terrain carrying expensive equipment. The incident I'm going to describe happened in October of 2022 during what should have been a routine 3-day survey job in the Pisgah National Forest, about 40 miles west of Asheville. My partner was a guy named Brian Kowalski, 31 years old, former Army combat engineer, 6 years of survey experience. We'd worked together on maybe 30 jobs by that point. I knew his routines, his gear preferences, his tendency to talk too much when he was nervous and go completely silent when he was focused. Most importantly, I knew exactly what equipment he carried and what he wore. Brian was obsessive about his field gear. He owned exactly 3 jackets for survey work, a bright orange safety vest for when we were working near roads or active construction, a dark green canvas work jacket for general field work, and a black waterproof shell for rain. That was it. He rotated between them, depending on conditions, and he never deviated from that system. On October 14th, 2022, he was wearing the green canvas jacket when we started the job. I know because I commented on it that morning. We met at the Forest Service access road gate at 7:30 a.m., the sun just clearing the ridgeline, temperature around 48 degrees Fahrenheit, clear skies predicted for the next 3 days. Brian pulled up in his truck right behind mine, and when he stepped out, he was wearing jeans, hiking boots, a gray thermal shirt, and that green canvas jacket. Green jacket day, I said. Expecting brush? He grinned. Always expect brush in Pisgah. This job's going to be a bushwhack special. He was right. The property we'd been hired to survey was a 90-acre parcel that hadn't been touched in decades. Old logging road access. But the roads had grown over years ago. Dense rhododendron thickets, steep slopes, and according to the preliminary maps, at least 3 streams we'd have to cross. The client was a developer looking to subdivide the land for high-end cabin lots, which meant we needed to establish corners, run boundary lines, and document every elevation change across the entire property. 3 days of work, camping on site, just Brian and me. We loaded up our packs, survey equipment, camping gear, food, water filtration, first aid, all the essentials. Brian carried the total station, a Leica TS-16 that cost about $40,000 and weighed 26 pounds with the case. I carried the GPS rover, data collector, prism poles, and flagging tape. We each had our personal overnight gear, tent, sleeping bag, stove, the usual. By 8:15 a.m., we were hiking in. The old logging road was barely visible, just a slight depression in the forest floor where trees grew slightly smaller and the undergrowth wasn't quite as thick. We followed it northeast, consulting the GPS coordinates the client had provided for the first property corner. The forest closed in around us, vast, thick oak and poplar overhead, rhododendron forming walls on either side, the ground soft with decades of leaf litter. We found the first corner marker around 10 a.m. An old iron pin, rusted but still solid, marking the southwest corner of the property. Brian set up the total station while I took GPS readings and recorded everything in the data collector. Standard procedure. We'd establish this corner as our benchmark and work our way around the boundary from here. Corner 1 confirmed. Brian called out I pressed to the total station's scope. Let's shoot the first bearing and start flagging the western boundary. We worked through the morning, moving north along what should have been the western property line. Every 100 feet, we'd stop, take readings, plant a flag, and record the data. The terrain was challenging, steep in places, thick with undergrowth everywhere, but not unusual for this kind of work. We'd done harder jobs. Around noon, we stopped for lunch near a small creek that cut across the property line. Brian pulled off his green jacket and draped it over a fallen log while we ate. Turkey sandwiches, granola bars, water from our hydration packs. The temperature had climbed to maybe 60 degrees, and the sun was filtering through the canopy in golden shafts. How far do you think we made it? Brian asked between bites. I checked the data collector. About 1,800 feet, or maybe a fifth of the way around the boundary. If we keep this pace, we should finish the perimeter by tomorrow afternoon, then spend day 3 documenting interior features. He nodded, chewing. Sounds right. This ridge is going to slow us down, though. He gestured north, where the terrain climbed sharply. Topo shows we're going up about 400 vertical feet over the next quarter mile. Fun times, I muttered. We finished eating, and Brian reached for his jacket. He pulled it on, zipped it halfway, and we kept moving. By 3 p.m., we'd covered the western boundary and were setting up to turn the northwest corner. This was where the job started feeling off. Brian had walked ahead to scout the next section while I was planting a boundary flag. He'd crested a small rise about 50 yards ahead, disappeared over the top, and I lost sight of him for maybe 2 minutes. When he came back into view, walking down the slope toward me, something was wrong. He was wearing the orange safety vest. I stopped mid-motion, flag in hand, staring at him. The orange vest was unmistakable bright blaze orange with reflective silver stripes, the kind you wear so hunters don't mistake you for a deer. Brian had been wearing the green canvas jacket 10 minutes ago. I had watched him zip it up after lunch. Hey, I called out, when did you change jackets? He looked down at himself, then back at me, confused. What? Your jacket. You're wearing the green one. Now you've got the orange vest. He frowned. Trevor, I've been wearing this the whole time. Since this morning. No, you haven't. You were wearing the green canvas jacket at the truck during the hike in all morning. I saw you take it off at lunch. He shook his head slowly. I don't know what you're talking about. I've had this vest on since we started. It's October, man, hunting season. I always wear orange in October. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. He sounded completely sincere, not defensive or joking. He genuinely believed he'd been wearing that vest all day. Brian, I watched you put on the green jacket this morning. I made a comment about it. You made a comment about me wearing orange, he said. You said something about being visible. Are you feeling okay? I stared at him. One of us was wrong. One of us was misremembering. And the worst part was, I couldn't be absolutely certain it was him. Had he been wearing orange this morning? I tried to replay the scene at the trucks. I could see him stepping out of his vehicle, could see us loading gear, but when I tried to focus on the specific color of his jacket, the memory felt slippery, uncertain. Yeah, I said finally. I'm fine. Just long day. Brain's tired. We should set up camp soon anyway, Brian said. Light's going to start fading in a couple hours. Let's finish this corner and find a flat spot. We worked until 4:30 p.m., then started looking for a campsite. We found a decent spot on a slight bench in the terrain, flat enough for tents, with a small spring nearby for water. Brian set up his tent while I assembled the camp stove and started filtering water. He was wearing the green canvas jacket again. I know because I was watching him specifically this time, paying attention, making absolutely certain the orange vest was gone. He'd changed back into the green jacket, the same one I remembered from this morning. Except I hadn't seen him change. He'd been in my sight the whole time we were setting up camp, and at no point had he gone to his pack to switch jackets. "Brian," I said carefully, "where's the orange vest?" He looked up from staking out his tent. "What orange vest?" "The one you were wearing an hour ago, when you came back from scouting the next section." He stood up, brushing dirt off his knees. "Trevor, I don't have an orange vest with me. I brought this jacket and my rain shell. That's it. Are you sure you're feeling all right? You keep asking about jackets." I set down the water filter. "You're telling me you didn't bring the orange safety vest? Why would I? We're not working near roads. No construction, just us in the forest." He was right. There was no reason to bring the safety vest on this job, but I'd seen him wearing it. I was certain, wasn't I? "Let me see your pack," I said. He shrugged and walked over to his backpack, unzipped it, and dumped the contents on the ground. Sleeping bag, food bag, extra clothes, water bottles, first aid kit, rain shell, the black waterproof one. No orange vest. "Satisfied?" he asked, but not unkindly. He looked concerned. "Seriously, man, are you feeling sick? Headache, dizziness? Could be altitude or dehydration." "I'm fine," I said, even though I wasn't sure that was true. "Just tired. You're right." We ate dinner as the sun set, freeze-dried chili, rehydrated, with boiling water, crackers, an apple each. Brian talked about his girlfriend, some argument they'd had before he left for this job. Normal conversation. He seemed completely normal. He was wearing the green jacket the entire time. I went to bed around 8 p.m., exhausted but uneasy. I lay in my sleeping bag, staring up at the tent ceiling, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Memory is unreliable. I knew that. The brain fills in gaps, creates false details, conflates events. Maybe I'd seen the orange vest on a previous job, and my tired brain had inserted it into today's timeline. That had to be it. I fell asleep telling myself that. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of footsteps outside my tent. Not animal footsteps, those sound different, irregular, cautious. These were human, boot treads on soft ground, steady and deliberate, circling my tent in a slow perimeter. I lay perfectly still, listening. The steps completed one full circle, then another, close enough that I could hear the soft compression of leaves, the occasional snap of a twig. "Brian?" I called out softly. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Just wind through the trees and my own breathing. "Brian, that you?" No response. I unzipped my sleeping bag and reached for my headlamp, clicked it on, and pushed open the tent flap. The campsite was empty. Brian's tent sat 15 feet away, door closed, no light inside. The camp stove and our gear were right where we'd left them. Nothing disturbed. I stepped out of my tent fully and swept the headlamp beam in a circle. Trees, undergrowth, the glint of our water bottles reflecting light. No footprints in the soft ground around my tent. No disturbed leaves, no sign anyone had been there. I walked over to Brian's tent and tapped the side. "Brian, you awake?" A groan from inside. "Am now. What's wrong? You didn't just walk around my tent?" "What? No. I've been asleep. What time is it?" I checked my watch. 2:20 a.m. "Sorry. I thought I heard something." "Probably a deer," he mumbled. "Go back to sleep." I stood there for another minute, sweeping my light across the campsite one more time. Nothing. I went back to my tent and zipped myself in. Sleep didn't come easy after that. The next morning, October 15th, we started work at 7 a.m. Brian emerged from his tent wearing the black rain shell. The sky was overcast, heavy clouds building to the west, so the rain jacket made sense. But I was certain, absolutely certain, he'd been wearing the green canvas jacket when he went to bed. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I was starting to doubt my own observations. We worked through the morning, continuing the boundary survey along the northern property line. The terrain here was difficult, steep slopes covered in mountain laurel so thick we had to crawl through it in places. Progress was slow. Brian was quiet, focused on the work, and I found myself watching him constantly, checking what he was wearing. Black rain shell. Always the black rain shell. Until it wasn't. We stopped for lunch around noon 30 at a rocky outcrop with a view over the valley below. Brian set down the total station and stretched his back. He was wearing the orange safety vest. I know I didn't imagine it this time because I was staring right at him, had been watching him for the past 3 hours. He'd been wearing the black rain shell when we started this morning, had been wearing it continuously while we worked, and now suddenly, without any break in my observation, he was wearing bright orange. "Brian," I said slowly, "look at what you're wearing." He glanced down. "Yeah? What about it?" "What jacket is that?" "My safety vest." "Why?" "You were wearing your rain shell this morning." He laughed. "Trevor, it hasn't rained. Why would I wear a rain shell?" He gestured at the sky. "Clouds cleared around 9 a.m. It's been dry all morning." I looked up. He was right. The sky was clear, just scattered cumulus clouds. But I remembered heavy overcast when we started. I remembered him commenting on the approaching weather. Didn't I? "What day is it?" I asked. He gave me a strange look. "October 15th, Saturday, same as it was this morning." "Dude, are you sure you're okay? You're acting really weird." "What jacket were you wearing yesterday?" "Yesterday? The green one." "Same as always when we're doing field work." He pulled out his water bottle and took a long drink. "Trevor, seriously, if you're not feeling good, we should head back. This job isn't worth getting hurt over." "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. Something was very wrong, and I couldn't figure out if the problem was with Brian or with my own perception. We finished lunch and kept working. I tried to focus on the survey, on the data, on the methodical process of establishing boundaries and recording measurements. But I couldn't stop glancing at Brian, checking his jacket, trying to catch the moment when it changed. It happened again around 3 p.m. We were setting up at a property corner, and I was adjusting the GPS rover while Brian sighted through the total station. I looked away for maybe 10 seconds to check the data collector screen. When I looked back, he was wearing the green canvas jacket, not the orange vest he'd been wearing at lunch. The green jacket, and he'd been in my peripheral vision the entire time. He hadn't moved from the total station, hadn't gone to his pack, hadn't done anything except look through the scope and call out readings. "Stop," I said. Brian looked up. "Stop what?" "Tell me what you're wearing right now." He looked down at himself. "My green jacket. Why do you keep asking about my clothes?" "Because it was orange 10 minutes ago." "Trevor, it's been green all day. It was green yesterday. It's my field jacket. I wear it on every job." He stood up from the total station and walked toward me, concern clear on his face. "Listen, I think we need to pack it in. You're clearly not well. Could be carbon monoxide from the stove, could be dehydration, could be a million things, but you need to see a doctor." "I'm not sick," I said. But even as the words came out, I wasn't sure. How else do you explain seeing things that apparently aren't there? "Then what's going on?" Brian asked. "You've been obsessed with my jacket since yesterday. You keep asking what day it is, what time it is, whether I'm wearing orange or green or black. That's not normal, man." He was right. None of this was normal. "Let's just finish this corner and call it a day," I said. "We'll set up camp, get some food in us, and see how I feel in the morning." Brian nodded slowly. "Okay. But if you're still confused tomorrow, we're hiking out. No argument." We worked until 5 p.m., then found another campsite about a quarter-mile from the work area. This one was near a larger stream, the water running clear and cold over mossy rocks. Brian set up his tent while I started filtering water. He was wearing the black rain shell. I didn't mention it. We ate dinner in silence. Brian kept glancing at me like I might start raving at any moment. Maybe he was right to be worried. I couldn't trust my own observations anymore. Every time I was certain I knew what he was wearing, the reality seemed to shift. After dinner, Brian announced he was going to scout tomorrow's work area before dark. "Just want to see what we're dealing with," he said. "Terrain looks nasty on the topo. I'll be back in 20 minutes." He walked east into the forest, and I watched him go. Black rain shell, hiking boots, orange hat. Wait, orange hat? He hadn't been wearing a hat before. I counted to 30, then followed him. I moved quietly, staying about 50 yards back, keeping him in sight through the trees. He was walking slowly, consulting a handheld GPS unit, stopping occasionally to examine the terrain. He was still wearing the black rain shell. I watched him for 5 minutes, He never went to his pack, never changed clothes, just walked, paused, checked the GPS, walked some more. Then he turned around, started walking back toward camp. I ducked behind a large oak and waited for him to pass. He walked by about 30 feet to my left, moving at a steady pace, eyes on the ground. He was wearing the green canvas jacket. I stood there behind the oak, not breathing, not moving. He passed out of sight, and I counted to 60 before following. When I got back to camp, Brian was kneeling by the stream, filling water bottles. He looked up when he heard me approach. "There you are," he said. "I was about to come looking for you. Where'd you go?" "Just walked a bit. Needed to clear my head." He nodded and stood up, brushing dirt off his knees. He was wearing the orange safety vest. 3 different jackets in the span of 10 minutes. 3 different outfits on the same person doing the same activity. And he didn't seem to notice. "Brian," I said carefully, "I need you to answer something honestly. Have you felt anything unusual today? Any weird sensations, missing time, anything like that?" He frowned. "No." "Why?" "Because I'm seeing you wearing different jackets, and you don't seem to be aware you're changing them." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Trevor, I haven't changed jackets. I've been wearing this vest since after lunch." He paused. "Is it possible you're seeing things that aren't there? Like actually hallucinating?" "I don't think so. Everything else looks normal. It's just you. Just your clothes." That's... He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "That's actually more concerning, man. That sounds like a very specific kind of hallucination. We should head back tomorrow. Get you checked out." Maybe he was right. Maybe my brain was misfiring somehow, creating false images, distorting my perception of one specific thing while leaving everything else intact. Or maybe something else was happening, something I didn't have words for. "Let me try something," I said. "Stay right there. Don't move." I pulled out my phone and opened the camera, aimed it at Brian, and took a photo. He looked puzzled but stood still. What's that supposed to prove? I looked at the photo on my screen. In the image, Brian was wearing the green canvas jacket, not the orange vest I was seeing with my eyes, the green jacket. I looked up from my phone. With my eyes, he was still wearing orange. I looked back at the phone, green jacket. I took 3 more photos in rapid succession. In all of them, green jacket, but when I looked at him directly, orange vest. "What do you see when you look at yourself?" I asked. He glanced down. "I see my vest, orange, same as always." "Look at this." I held out my phone, showing him the photos. He leaned in, squinting at the screen. His face went pale. That's not what I'm wearing." "I know. But in the photo, it is what I'm wearing. I can see it." He looked down at himself again. "But right now, I'm wearing orange. I can see it. I can feel it." He grabbed the fabric of the vest, tugging at it. "It's real. To you, it's real. To my eyes, it's real. But the camera sees something different." We stood there in the fading light, both of us staring at my phone, then at Brian, then back at the phone. "What the hell is happening?" Brian whispered. I didn't have an answer. We decided to hike out at first light. Whatever was happening, it was beyond our ability to handle or understand. We needed to get off this property, get back to civilization, and figure out what to do next. That night, I barely slept. I lay in my tent, listening to every sound, watching the shadows of tree branches move across the tent fabric in the moonlight. Around midnight, I heard Brian's tent zipper. Footsteps. Movement in the camp. I unzipped my tent and looked out. Brian was walking past our campsite, heading north into the forest. He was wearing the green canvas jacket. "Brian?" I called out. "Where are you going?" He didn't respond. Didn't turn around. Just kept walking at a steady pace, disappearing into the darkness between the trees. I grabbed my headlamp and followed. He was about 40 yards ahead, easy to track with my light. He walked in a straight line, not following any trail, just moving through the forest with purpose. "Brian, stop." He didn't stop. Didn't acknowledge me at all. I jogged to catch up, and as I got closer, I saw he was walking strangely. His gait was too smooth, too even, like he was on a treadmill instead of rough terrain. No ducking under branches. No stepping over logs. Just walking, as if the forest wasn't there. I got within 10 feet of him, and he vanished. Not gradually, not fading. One moment he was there, solid and real in my headlamp beam, and the next moment the light was shining through empty forest. I stopped so fast I nearly fell. The forest was silent. No footsteps, no rustling, just empty woods. I swept my light in all directions. Nothing. Then I heard his voice behind me. "Trevor? What are you doing out here?" I spun around. Brian was standing 15 feet behind me, wearing the black rain shell, holding his own headlamp. He looked confused and worried. "What are you doing out here?" he repeated. I followed you. You walked out of camp. I have been in my tent the whole time. I heard you moving around and came to check on you." "No." "You walked past my tent. I saw you. You were heading north." He shook his head. "Trevor, I just woke up. You were the one walking around." I looked down. I was standing exactly where the other Brian, the one in the green jacket, had disappeared. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now. We're packing up and hiking out in the dark. It's midnight. The trail's barely visible in daylight. We'll break an ankle. I don't care. Something's wrong with this place. We need to go." Brian studied my face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there convinced him. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's pack up." We broke camp in 20 minutes, stuffing gear into packs with shaking hands, not bothering with organization or proper packing. We just wanted out. The hike back to the trucks took 3 hours. We used headlamps and followed our GPS track from the way in, moving carefully over the rough terrain. Brian didn't ask questions. I didn't offer explanations. We saw 3 more Brians. The first one was standing next to a large hemlock tree, wearing the orange vest, watching us pass. He didn't move or speak, just stood there, tracking us with his eyes. The second was sitting on a fallen log about a mile from the trucks, wearing the green jacket, head in his hands like he was crying. When we got close, he looked up. His face was Brian's face, but the expression was wrong. Empty, like looking at a photograph of a person instead of the actual person. The third was walking the same direction we were, about 50 yards ahead, wearing the black rain shell. We never caught up to him. He stayed exactly the same distance in front, no matter how fast we walked. The real Brian, the one next to me, the one I'd worked with for 7 years, didn't see any of them. When I pointed them out, he looked where I was pointing and saw only forest. We reached the trucks at 3:47 a.m. Both vehicles were right where we'd left them, covered in morning dew, completely normal. Brian threw his gear in his truck bed and turned to me. "Are you seeing me right now? Like, actually me?" "Yes," I said. "What am I wearing?" I looked at him carefully. Really looked, focusing on every detail. Black rain shell, jeans, hiking boots, gray thermal shirt underneath. He looked down at himself. "That's what I see too." He paused. "But you took those photos yesterday. The ones where the camera saw something different. Do you still have those?" I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. The photos were gone. Not deleted, the whole timeline had changed. The last photo on my phone was from October 13th, the day before we'd started this job. Everything from the 14th and 15th had vanished. "They're not here," I said. Brian nodded slowly, like this was exactly what he'd expected. "Trevor, I need to tell you something, but I need you to stay calm." "What?" "I don't think we just spent 2 days surveying that property." "What do you mean?" "Check your watch. Check your phone. Check what day it is." I looked at my phone. October 14th, 2022, 3:51 a.m. The same day we'd started. We'd been in the forest for 20 hours, but my phone insisted we'd only been gone since 7:30 the previous morning. "That's not possible," I said. "None of this is possible, but here we are." Brian leaned against his truck. "I think something happened to us in there. I think we got, caught in something, and I think there are versions of us still in there. The other Brians. Maybe. Or maybe those were us at different times. Different loops. I don't know." He rubbed his face with both hands. "All I know is we made it out, and I'm not going back. Ever. We have to report this. The client's waiting for the survey data." "Report what?" "That we lost time and saw duplicates of me wearing different jackets. They'll think we're on drugs or having a psychotic break." He pulled his truck keys from his pocket. "I'm going to tell them we couldn't complete the survey due to equipment failure. You should do the same. And then we should never talk about this again." He was probably right. Who would believe us? But I can't let it go completely, because I keep thinking about those other Bryans, the ones we left behind. Are they still in there, walking the property line, setting up total stations, camping in those same spots? Are they experiencing the same loops, the same confusion, wondering why nothing makes sense? And more importantly, did we actually get out, or are we just in a different layer of the same loop? I don't work with Brian anymore. He quit Appalachian Survey Solutions 2 weeks after that job and moved to Colorado. We don't stay in touch. I still work as a surveyor, but I won't take jobs in Pisgah National Forest. I won't go near that 90-acre parcel. The client eventually hired a different company. As far as I know, they completed the survey without incident. But sometimes I think about that property, I think about the boundary we were trying to establish, and I wonder if maybe that's the problem. Maybe there are places where boundaries don't work the way they're supposed to, where the line between one thing and another gets blurred, and if you're not careful, you can slip from one side to the other without realizing it. If you work in land surveying, or any job that takes you into remote areas for extended periods, and you start noticing inconsistencies, small things that don't add up, details that keep changing, duplicates of people or equipment that shouldn't be there, get out immediately. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't convince yourself you're tired or dehydrated or seeing things. Trust your instinct that something is wrong and leave. And whatever you do, don't try to establish boundaries in places where boundaries don't want to exist. Because once you start defining the edges of something that refuses to be defined, you might find yourself on the wrong side of the line. And there might not be a way back. Story 3. The sun was exactly where it had been 6 hours ago, locked at 2 o'clock in an empty sky, and the mile marker I just passed read 312 for the 4th time. I need you to understand something before I explain how I got here. I'm not the kind of driver who loses track of time or gets confused on long hauls. I've been running 18-wheelers for 22 years, the last 14 of those on the same route, Interstate 40 from Flagstaff, Arizona to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 328 miles of high desert, manageable grades, and predictable weather. I know every exit, every rest stop, every landmark along that stretch. I've driven it in snow, rain, 115-degree heat, and dead-of-night darkness. I know when the sun should move. And this sun wasn't moving. My name is Kyle Brennan, 46 years old, and I drive for Southwest Regional Freight out of Phoenix. On November 9th, 2023, I picked up a load in Flagstaff Industrial Paper Products, 14 pallets, 26,000 pounds, with a delivery deadline in Albuquerque by 7 p.m. that same day. Standard run. I'd done it maybe 300 times. I left the Flagstaff Distribution Center at 11:47 a.m., right on schedule. The sun was high and slightly south, exactly where it should be in early November. Temperature gauge on the dash read 62 degrees. Clear skies. Light traffic heading east on I-40. Everything was normal until mile marker 298. That's where things stopped making sense. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and explain how I ended up driving in circles while the sun watched from the same position for 6 hours straight. The route from Flagstaff to Albuquerque is straightforward. You take I-40 east through the Painted Desert, past Winslow, Holbrook, Sanders, then cross into New Mexico at Lupton. Keep going through Gallup, Grants, and finally into Albuquerque. The whole run takes about 4.5 hours if you maintain speed and don't hit construction delays. I'd been driving for about 2 hours when I passed through Holbrook. Stopped at the Pilot truck stop just east of town to fuel up and grab coffee. 12-ounce dark roast, 2 sugars. Same as always. Checked my phone while the tank filled. 1:14 p.m. I was making good time, no issues. Back on the road by 1:23 p.m. The terrain here is classic high desert. Flat scrubland stretching to distant mesas. Sparse vegetation, the kind of landscape where you can see for 30 miles in every direction. The interstate runs straight for long stretches, gentle curves, occasional hills, but nothing dramatic. In November, the sun tracks across the southern sky, moving steadily west as the afternoon progresses. I was about 15 miles past Holbrook when I noticed the first weird detail. There's a distinctive rock formation on the north side of the highway around mile marker 298. Three sandstone pillars that locals call the Three Sisters, eroded spires, maybe 60 feet tall, reddish-brown stone against the pale sky. I've passed them thousands of times. They're a landmark I use to gauge my progress. I passed them at 1:41 p.m. Noted the time because I was calculating my ETA, making sure I'd hit Albuquerque with time to spare. 10 minutes later, I passed them again. Same formation, same angle, same distance from the highway. But according to my odometer, I'd traveled 11 miles. The Three Sisters should have been 11 miles behind me. I checked my mirrors. The rock formation was receding behind me, exactly like it should. I looked at the odometer again. It was still counting up normally. 299 miles. 300. 301. I told myself I'd been mistaken. Maybe there were two similar formations, and I'd confused them. It happens. The desert all looks the same after a while, but I knew I was lying to myself. I kept driving. The highway stretched ahead, empty except for a few scattered vehicles. I passed a green SUV, got passed by a white semi hauling a refrigerated trailer. Normal traffic patterns. Mile marker 312 appeared on my right. I noted it, kept going. 5 miles later, I saw the Three Sisters again. This time I was paying attention. This time I was certain. Those same three pillars, same configuration, same distance from the road. And when I checked the mile marker as I passed, it read 298. I'd gone backward. Somehow I'd lost 14 miles. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the GPS. It showed me on I-40, heading east, exactly where I should be. Current location, between Holbrook and Sanders. The blue line showed my truck moving steadily along the highway, but when I looked at the mile markers, they were counting down. 312, 308, 304, going the wrong direction. Even though I was driving east, even though the GPS said I was moving forward, I slowed down, pulled onto the shoulder, and stopped. Put the truck in park, and sat there with the engine idling, trying to make sense of this. The sun was still in the same position it had been at 1:41 p.m., slightly past center sky, maybe 2 o'clock position, casting short shadows to the northeast. It hadn't moved at all. I checked my phone, 2:53 p.m. Over an hour had passed, but the sun was in the exact same spot. I'm not talking about barely noticeable movement. I'm talking about zero change. The shadows on the ground were identical to what they'd been an hour ago. The angle of light coming through my windshield hadn't shifted a single degree. That's when the real fear started. I've driven through weird weather. I've seen optical illusions on desert highways, phantom lakes, shimmering air, heat distortions that make the road look like it's moving. I've driven through dust storms so thick I couldn't see the hood of my truck. But this was different. This was wrong, in a way that made my skin crawl. I pulled back onto the highway and kept driving. What else was I going to do? Turn around? I had a delivery deadline. I had a load worth $40,000 sitting in my trailer. I had a job to do. Mile marker 312. Again. I had driven for another 20 minutes, covered another 15 miles according to the odometer, and I was back at the same marker. The Three Sisters appeared ahead on my left. I passed them. Watched them recede in my mirrors. 5 minutes later, I passed them again. The sun hadn't moved. My phone said 3:18 p.m. I had been driving for almost 2 hours since leaving Holbrook, but the sun insisted it was still early afternoon. I tried calling my dispatcher. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. No answer, no voicemail, just endless ringing. I tried calling my wife. Same thing, infinite ringing, no connection. I tried 911. The call wouldn't connect at all. Just an error message. Call failed. The radio was worse. Every station was static. Not the usual between stations noise, but a specific kind of static, rhythmic, pulsing, almost like breathing. I switched it off. The highway remained empty. No other vehicles. The white semi and green SUV I'd seen earlier were gone. Just me and the endless road and that frozen sun. Mile marker 312 appeared again. I started counting. Every time I passed it, I made a tally mark on the notepad I kept in the center console. The notepad where I logged fuel stops, and delivery times and maintenance reminders. 4 times, 5 times, 6. Each loop took about 23 minutes. I'd drive past the marker, continue for what felt like miles, and then there it would be again, appearing out of nowhere, around a curve or over a rise. The Three Sisters. Every time. By the 7th loop, I noticed something new. There was another truck on the side of the road. It was pulled onto the shoulder about half a mile past mile marker 312, hazard lights flashing. A Freightliner Cascadia, same model as mine, red cab, unmarked white trailer. I slowed as I approached. Considered stopping. But something about it felt wrong. The truck sat there perfectly. No visible damage, no blown tire, no reason to be stopped in the middle of nowhere. And it was in the exact same position every time I looped past. Same angle, same place. Hazard lights blinking at the same interval. On the 8th loop, I saw the driver. He was standing next to the truck facing the highway. Tall guy, maybe 6 feet, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He wasn't waving for help, wasn't looking at his phone, just standing there, hands at his sides, watching the road, watching me. I didn't stop. On the 9th loop, he was closer to the highway, still standing, still watching. On the 10th loop, he was standing on the white line at the edge of the road, just standing there as I passed, turning his head to track my truck. I couldn't see his face. The sun was behind him, that same unchanging sun, putting him in silhouette. On the 11th loop, I made a decision. I was going to stop. I was going to talk to him, figure out what was happening. I slowed down as I approached. The truck was there. The driver was there, now standing in the middle of the right lane, directly in my path. I hit the brakes. The air brakes hissed and grabbed. My truck slowed. The figure didn't move. Just stood there, waiting. I stopped about 50 feet away and sat there with the engine running, staring at this person standing in the middle of Interstate 40. He started walking toward me. Not fast, not slow. Just a steady walk, boots scuffing on the asphalt. As he got closer, the sun finally moved. It dropped behind him, creating a glare that made it impossible to see details. But I could see his outline, and the outline was wrong. His proportions were off. Arms too long, torso too narrow, head tilted at an angle that would have broken a normal person's neck. I put the truck in gear and hit the gas. The figure dove to the side as I roared past. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't want to see if he got up. I just drove. Mile marker 312, the Three Sisters. Loop number 12. But this time, something was different. There were 2 trucks on the shoulder now. The red Freightliner was still there. And behind it, pulled onto the shoulder about 100 yards further, was another truck. A Freightliner Cascadia, same model as mine. Blue cab, Southwest Regional Freight logo on the door. My truck. I slowed down without meaning to, staring at this impossible thing. It was exactly like my truck. Same year, same model, same company markings, even the same license plate number. And standing next to it was a driver. Average height, brown jacket, jeans, baseball cap, me. I was standing next to my own truck, watching myself drive past. I didn't stop this time. I sped up, pushed the throttle until I was going 75, then 80, watching the speedometer climb. The road stayed the same. The scenery didn't blur. The mile markers kept appearing at regular intervals. 312, 312, 312, 13 loops, 14, 15. More trucks appeared. Every loop, another one. All different colors and companies, but all the same model. All pulled onto the shoulder. All with drivers standing beside them, watching the road. On loop 21, I counted 14 trucks lined up along the shoulder like a parking lot. On loop 26, there were too many to count. They stretched along both sides of the highway, a corridor of abandoned semis with drivers standing motionless beside them, all watching me pass. The sun still hadn't moved. My phone said 7:42 p.m. I'd been driving for almost 8 hours. I'd missed my delivery window by 42 minutes. I had driven past mile marker 312 times. I should have been in Albuquerque. I should have been backing into a loading dock, getting signatures, unhooking my trailer. Instead, I was here, wherever here was. On loop 41, My truck ran out of fuel. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. The cab went silent, except for the hiss of air brakes as I coasted to a stop. Right next to mile marker 312, I sat there in the sudden quiet, watching the sun that would never set, and I realized I had a choice to make. I could stay in the truck, lock the doors, wait, see if the loop would reset when I stopped being in motion. Or I could get out, join the others. I looked in my driver's side mirror. Behind me, maybe a quarter-mile back, I could see the line of trucks, and standing beside the nearest one was a figure in a brown jacket. Me. Again. He was walking toward my truck. Not fast, just that same steady walk, getting closer. I looked ahead. The road stretched empty toward a horizon I'd never reach. I made my choice. I opened the driver's door and stepped down onto the asphalt. The air was cool and still. No wind. No sound except my boots on the pavement. The sun watched from its permanent position. I started walking east, away from my truck, away from the figure approaching from behind, just walking down the center of the interstate, following the white dotted line. The Three Sisters appeared ahead. I kept walking. Mile marker 312 passed on my right. I kept walking. Behind me, I heard footsteps, multiple sets, the drivers from all those trucks, all walking in the same direction, following me, or maybe I was following them. It was hard to tell anymore. Ahead, something shimmered. The air bent wrong, like heat distortion, but the temperature was cool and the sun was exactly where it had always been. I walked toward the shimmer. As I got closer, I could see through it. Beyond the distortion was more highway, more desert, but the light was different, warmer, golden instead of that flat, dead illumination I'd been driving through. The sun on the other side of the shimmer was setting, moving, actually moving, sinking toward the western horizon like it was supposed to. I reached out and touched the distortion. My hand passed through like pushing through a soap bubble. The air on the other side felt different, real. I stepped through. The sound hit me first. Wind, traffic, the rumble of engines on the interstate, normal sounds. I turned around. Behind me was Interstate 40 stretching west toward Holbrook. Normal highway, normal desert, normal afternoon light from a sun that was actually moving across the sky. No line of trucks, no stationary drivers, no shimmer. Just road. I pulled out my phone. 7:49 p.m., November 9th, 2023. I had 7 missed calls from my dispatcher, 3 from my wife, 2 voicemails, and according to the GPS, I was standing on the shoulder of I-40 at mile marker 314, 2 miles east of 312. My truck was gone, just gone. 26,000 pounds of freight, $140,000 vehicle, everything I needed to do my job vanished. New Mexico State Police cruiser pulled up behind me, lights flashing. The officer stepped out, hand near his weapon. "Sir, are you all right? We've had reports of a man walking on the interstate." I didn't know what to say. My truck, it ran out of fuel. It was right here. The officer looked around. "I don't see any trucks, sir. You been drinking? Using any substances?" "No. I'm a commercial driver. I was making a delivery to Albuquerque. My truck was here." He radioed something to dispatch, then looked at me with what I can only describe as pity. "Sir, I'm going to need you to take a seat in my vehicle. We'll get you checked out." They found me walking on the interstate at 7:51 p.m. My truck was eventually located 3 days later in the Pilot truck stop parking lot in Holbrook, right where I'd fueled up at 1:14 p.m. The fuel tank was full. The load was intact. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. The surveillance footage from the truck stop showed me fueling up, getting coffee, and getting back in my truck at 1:23 p.m. Then the truck sat there for 6 hours and 28 minutes, not moving, until a Pilot employee noticed it and called it in. According to every record, fuel receipts, GPS logs, dispatch communications, I never left Holbrook. My truck sat in that parking lot from 1:23 p.m. until 7:51 p.m. But I remember driving. I remember the loops. I remember mile marker 312 appearing 41 times. I remember the other trucks, the other drivers, the figure with wrong proportions walking toward me. And I remember the sun that never moved. Southwest Regional Freight fired me. Failed to make delivery. Abandoned vehicle. Possible substance use. They kept it quiet, didn't press charges. Probably to avoid publicity. I don't drive anymore. I work at a warehouse now, forklift operator, third shift. I don't go near highways. But sometimes I think about those other drivers, the ones standing beside their trucks on that endless loop. I think about the me I saw, the one who'd stopped and gotten out before I did. How long had he been there? How many loops had he completed before he stopped moving? And the worst thought, the one that keeps me up at night, what if I didn't actually make it out? What if I'm still there, still walking that highway, still chasing a horizon I'll never reach? What if this, the warehouse job, the apartment, the normal life, is just another layer of the same loop? Because sometimes, when I'm not paying attention, I glance at the sky and the sun is in the wrong position. Shadows fall at impossible angles. And for just a moment, everything feels flat and dead and wrong. Then I blink, and it's normal again. But I'm never quite sure. If you drive long-haul routes through remote areas and you start noticing landmarks repeating, mile markers appearing out of sequence, or the sun staying in one position for too long, do not investigate. Do not try to make sense of it. Do not keep driving. Pull over immediately, get out of your vehicle, and walk in any direction except forward. Walk until you see something that looks wrong, a shimmer, a distortion, a place where the light bends incorrectly. Walk through it, even if it terrifies you, even if it doesn't make sense, because the alternative is staying on that road forever, driving the same miles over and over, watching the sun that never sets, until eventually you stop trying to escape and just become another figure standing beside another truck, waiting for the next driver to loop past. And trust me, you don't want that. The sun never sets there. It never sets, and it never will. Story 4. The trail camera recorded 72 hours of footage in a single night, and I was in every frame, doing things I never did. I'm looking at the timestamp right now. November 4th, 2023, 8:47 p.m. The camera shows me walking past, heading north on the trail. Then 8:49 p.m. I walk past again, same direction. 8:52 p.m. again. 8:56 p.m. 9:01 p.m. 9:07 p.m. Over and over. The same walk, the same posture, the same flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The problem is, I didn't walk that trail on November 4th. I was home in Bemidji, 40 miles away, having dinner with my daughter. But before I explain how I discovered this footage, I need to give you context about what I do and why I had cameras set up in the Superior National Forest in the first place. My name is Jack Mercer, 52 years old, and I've worked as a conservation officer for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources for the past 26 years. My patrol area covers roughly 800 square miles of northern Minnesota wilderness, mostly Superior National Forest, some state parks, thousands of acres of dense boreal forest, lakes, rivers, and wetlands. My job is to enforce hunting and fishing regulations, investigate poaching, monitor wildlife populations, and maintain trail cameras for research purposes. Those trail cameras are critical tools. We use them to track animal movements, document rare species, and occasionally catch illegal activity. They're motion-activated, infrared-capable, and they timestamp every photo and video. Completely reliable. I have personally maintained over 60 cameras across my patrol area for the past 8 years. In early October of 2023, I started getting reports of unusual activity near the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. Campers hearing strange sounds at night. Hikers finding deer carcasses arranged in ways that didn't match predator behavior. A few people claimed to see figures moving through the forest that disappeared when approached. Standard stuff, usually. Bears, wolves, people's imaginations running wild in the wilderness. But the frequency of reports was unusual, and they were all clustered in the same general area, a remote section of forest about 12 miles north of the Sawbill Trail. On October 28, 2023, I hiked into that area and set up 3 trail cameras at strategic points along an old logging road that hadn't seen vehicle traffic in probably 30 years. The road was overgrown but still navigable on foot, and it connected several areas where the reports had originated. I positioned the cameras to cover different sight lines. Camera 1 at the south end of the logging road, facing north, mounted on a white pine about 6 feet off the ground. Camera 2 roughly a mile north, facing east toward a small clearing where I'd found some of those unusual deer carcasses. Camera 3 at the north end, about 2.5 miles from Camera 1, facing south back down the road. I activated all 3 cameras at 2:37 p.m. on October 28th and plan to retrieve them in 2 weeks. Standard deployment. On November 5th, 2023, I got a call from my supervisor, District Ranger Tom Halverson. Someone had vandalized the trail sign near the Sawbill Trail access point, and he wanted me to check it out since I was familiar with the area. I drove out there that afternoon, examined the sign, typical teenage nonsense, spray paint, nothing serious, and decided since I was already in the area, I might as well pull the trail cameras early. I had a feeling they might have captured something useful, and I was between other assignments. I hiked in to Camera 1 first, arriving around 3:45 p.m. Plenty of daylight left, temperature around 38 degrees, clear skies, beautiful November afternoon. The camera was right where I'd left it, securely strapped to the pine, no visible damage. I unlocked the weatherproof case and pulled the SD card. The battery indicator showed 73% good for another month at least. I continued to Camera 2, collected that SD card as well, everything normal. Camera 3 was different. I found it on the ground, 15 feet from where I'd mounted it. The case was intact, not broken or cracked, but the tree strap had been completely unbuckled, not torn, not cut. Unbuckled properly, like someone had deliberately removed it and set it on the ground. The camera was still on, still recording. The SD card was full. That was my first warning something was wrong. These cameras have 32 gigabyte cards. At the quality settings I use, they can store roughly 2 weeks of intermittent footage, a few seconds here, a minute there, whenever motion triggers the sensor. To fill the entire card in 8 days would require almost constant motion in front of the camera. I collected the SD card and hiked back to my truck. By the time I got there, it was getting dark, maybe 5:30 p.m. I drove back to the district office in Ely, grabbed dinner from the subway down the street, turkey on wheat, same as always, and settled into my office to review the footage. I started with Camera 1 and Camera 2. Exactly what I expected. Deer, a black bear, some ravens, a coyote, one brief clip of what might have been a wolf, too far away to be certain. A porcupine waddling past at 2 a.m., normal wildlife activity. Then I loaded the SD card from Camera 3. The first clip was timestamped October 28th, 2023, 2:39 p.m., just 2 minutes after I'd activated the camera. It showed me walking away from the camera, heading south down the logging road, my back to the lens, normal. That was me leaving after setting it up. The second clip was October 28th, 5:18 p.m., a deer walking past, normal. The third clip was October 29th, 11:23 a.m., another deer, fine. Then things got strange. October 29th, 9:14 p.m., the camera showed a figure walking north on the logging road toward the camera. Male, average height, wearing a dark jacket and carrying a flashlight. The figure walked directly past the camera, face partially visible in the infrared glow. It was me, or someone who looked exactly like me. Same jacket, my Department of Natural Resources field jacket, same build, same gait, even the same flashlight, a Streamlight ProTac that I'd owned for 6 years. But I wasn't in the forest. On October 29th, I was home. I specifically remember that evening because my daughter Emma came over for dinner. We watched a movie. I didn't leave my house after 4 p.m. I backed up the clip and watched it again. The figure's face was clearly visible for about 2 seconds as he passed the camera. Same jawline, same nose, same weathered features I saw in the mirror every morning. Timestamp. October 29th, 2023, 9:14 p.m. I checked my phone's location history. On October 29th at 9:14 p.m. I was at my house in Bemidji, 40 miles away. I kept watching. October 30th, 1:47 a.m. The same figure, walking south this time, back the way he'd come. October 30th, 8:12 a.m., walking north again. October 30th, 3:33 p.m. Walking south. October 31st, 12:08 a.m. Walking north. Over and over. Different times, different directions, but always the same figure. Always me. I counted. Between October 29th and November 5th, the camera captured 147 clips of this person walking past, sometimes walking north, sometimes south, sometimes standing still, just outside the camera's primary field of view, barely visible at the edge of the frame. The longest clip was 4 minutes and 18 seconds of the figure standing motionless on the logging road, facing the camera, not moving at all. Just standing there in the darkness, flashlight off, the infrared camera showing his face in stark black and white. My face. Staring at the camera like he knew it was there. But here's what made it impossible. On November 1st, 2023, there was a continuous block of footage starting at 8:47 p.m. and running until 8:51 a.m. the next morning. 11 hours and 4 minutes of uninterrupted recording. The camera should have broken the footage into individual clips based on motion events, but this was one single file. And throughout those 11 hours, the figure me walked past the camera every 3 to 7 minutes. I did the math. That's approximately 96 passes in 11 hours. Walking the same section of trail, over and over, in a continuous loop. I sat in my office until 2 a.m., watching every second of footage, and the pattern never changed. Walk past heading north. A few minutes later, walk past heading south. Again and again and again. The timestamp was continuous and consistent. No gaps, no jumps, no evidence of tampering. On November 4th, the night I was having dinner with Emma, the camera recorded me walking that trail 38 times between 8 p.m. and midnight. I called Emma. She answered on the third ring, voice groggy. Dad, it's 2 a.m. What's wrong? Emma, I need you to confirm something. November 4th, last night I was at your place for dinner, right? Silence. Then, yeah, Dad, you came over at 6. We made pasta. You left around 9:30. Are you okay? What was I wearing? What? What jacket was I wearing when I came over? I don't. Your blue fleece, I think? The one Mom gave you? Dad, what's going on? And I was there the whole time? From 6 to 9:30? Yes, you were there. We ate, we watched that documentary about wolves you wanted to see. You fell asleep on the couch during the last 20 minutes. I had to wake you up when it ended. Her voice sharpened with concern. Dad, you're scaring me. What happened? Nothing. I'm fine. Go back to sleep. I'm sorry I woke you. I hung up before she could ask more questions. My blue fleece. Not my DNR field jacket. And I was asleep on Emma's couch at 9:14 p.m. when the camera showed me walking through the forest. I spent the rest of the night trying to rationalize it. Someone wearing similar clothes. Someone who happened to look like me. A weird glitch in the camera's timestamp system. Video corruption, creating duplicate frames. None of it held up. The next morning, November 6th, I drove back to the trail. I needed to see that section of logging road in person, needed to understand what the camera had recorded. I parked at the access point and hiked in. The weather had turned temperature in the low 20s, fresh snow on the ground from overnight flurries, perfect tracking conditions. I reached the location where camera 3 had been positioned. The tree was obvious, a large spruce with a distinctive split trunk. I could see the marks where the camera strap had pressed into the bark, and in the snow there were footprints. Lots of them, a trail of boot prints going back and forth along the logging road, exactly like the footage showed. Someone had walked this trail repeatedly, packing down the snow into a visible path. I examined the prints. The tread pattern was distinctive Danner Stronghold boots, 8-inch height, lug sole. I was wearing Danner Strongholds. I'd owned them for 3 years. I recognized the wear pattern on the heel, the slight asymmetry in the left boot, where I'd stepped on a sharp rock and gouged the sole. These prints were from my boots. Not similar boots. Mine specifically. I followed the trail north. The prints continued for about 200 yards, then stopped at a point where the logging road intersected with a narrow game trail heading east. At that intersection, the footprints multiplied. Not just my boot pattern anymore. There were dozens of different prints, all converging at this one spot. Different sizes, different treads, all heading east on the game trail. I counted at least 15 distinct print patterns, a group of people all walking the same direction. None of the prints came back. They all headed east, into thick forest where there was no trail, no destination I knew of, nothing but miles of wilderness. I stood there in the cold looking at those prints and made a decision I probably shouldn't have made. I followed them. The game trail was barely visible, just a slight depression in the snow where deer had passed through. The boot prints were clear, though, easy to track. I followed them for a quarter mile, then half a mile, going deeper into forest I'd never thoroughly explored. The terrain got rougher. Steep slopes, dense underbrush, fallen logs blocking the way. Whoever had made these prints had pushed through all of it, maintaining a straight eastward bearing. After about a mile, I found the first camera. It was lying in the snow, partially buried. Not one of mine. A different brand, a Moultrie M50, newer model, still in decent condition. I picked it up and checked. No SD card, no batteries, just an empty housing. 50 yards further, another camera, different brand, also empty. Then another, and another. Within a 100-yard radius, I found 11 trail cameras, all removed from their original positions, all stripped of SD cards and batteries, all left scattered in the snow. Someone had collected these cameras from all over the forest and dumped them here. The boot prints continued east. I kept following. At a mile and a half from the logging road, the forest opened into a small clearing I'd never seen before, maybe 60 feet across, roughly circular, ringed by white pines. In the center of the clearing was a pile of SD cards, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All the same type SanDisk 32 gigabyte cards, the kind I used in my cameras. They were arranged in a neat mound, like someone had carefully stacked them. Around the pile the snow was trampled flat by dozens of boot prints, all circling the mound in the same counterclockwise direction. I approached slowly, not sure what I was seeing or what it meant. As I got closer, I realized some of the SD cards were labeled little strips of white tape with handwritten dates and locations. I picked one up. The label read, Camera 12, June 2021, Gun Flint Trail. That was one of mine. I remember deploying that camera. I had pulled it in August 2021 and reviewed the footage. Nothing unusual. Standard wildlife monitoring. I picked up another card. Camera 7, September 2022, Echo Trail North. Also mine. Also reviewed and archived. These were SD cards I'd already collected, already reviewed, already stored in the archive room at the district office. Except they were here. In a pile, in the middle of nowhere. I started going through them frantically, reading labels, my handwriting, my cameras, dates going back 4 years, and mixed in were cards I didn't recognize, different handwriting, different locations. Private property, Ely, October 2023. Backyard monitoring, Virginia, MN, July 2022. Trail camera stolen, reported to police. Civilian cameras. Personal security cameras. Cameras I'd never touched. All dumped here in one pile. I pulled out my phone to take photos. No signal. But that didn't matter. I just needed documentation. That's when I heard the footsteps. Someone was walking through the forest behind me. Boot treads on crusty snow, steady and deliberate. I turned around. About 50 yards away, at the edge of the clearing, a figure stood among the trees. Dark jacket. Average height. Watching me. The distance and lighting made it hard to see details, but I knew. I knew before I even focused on the face. It was me. The figure didn't move. Just stood there, hands at his sides, staring across the clearing. I raised my hand. A wave, a gesture, something to provoke a reaction. The figure raised his hand. Same motion, same timing. A mirror. Except delayed by maybe half a second. Who are you? I called out. No response. The figure lowered his hand when I lowered mine. I started walking toward him. He didn't move, just watched me approach. When I got within 20 feet, he turned and walked back into the forest. I ran after him. He was fast. Not running, just walking at that same steady pace, but somehow maintaining distance. I crashed through underbrush, ducked under branches, followed the boot prints in the snow. He stayed exactly the same distance ahead, 30 feet. Never closer, never farther. After maybe 200 yards, I lost sight of him. The prints continued, though, so I kept following. They led me in a wide circle, back toward the clearing. When I emerged from the trees, I was on the opposite side from where I'd entered. The pile of SD cards sat in the center, undisturbed. And standing on the far side of the clearing, exactly where I'd been standing when I first saw him, was the figure, still watching. I walked around the clearing to the left. He walked around to the right, maintaining the same relative position, always opposite me. "What do you want?" I shouted. He opened his mouth. I saw his jaw move, saw him form words, but no sound reached me, like watching a video on mute. Then he pointed, not at me, past me, into the forest behind me. I turned around. 3 more figures stood among the trees, all wearing dark jackets, all my height and build, all me. They started walking toward the clearing. That same steady pace. I ran. South, back toward the logging road, not following any trail, just crashing through the forest in pure panic. Branches whipped my face. I tripped over hidden logs, fell twice, got up and kept running. Behind me I heard footsteps. Multiple sets. Walking, not running. Never speeding up. Just following. I don't know how long I ran. Could have been 10 minutes. Could have been 30. Eventually I hit the logging road and recognized where I was. I was at the exact spot where camera 3 had been mounted. The camera was back, strapped to the tree, exactly as I had originally positioned it. Red recording light blinking in the fading afternoon light. I stared at it. I'd collected this camera 2 days ago. I had the SD card in my office. This camera shouldn't be here. I looked down. In the fresh snow, there was a single set of boot prints leading up to the tree. My boot prints. According to the tracks, I'd walked up to this tree from the south, mounted the camera, and walked back south. But I hadn't. I'd just run here from the east, chased by whatever those things were. I turned and walked south, following my own tracks. They led to my truck, which was parked at the access point, exactly where I'd left it. Except when I checked the time, it was 5:47 p.m. on November 6th. I'd entered the forest at 9:30 a.m. I'd been out here for over 8 hours, but it felt like maybe 2. I got on my truck and drove back to Ely. Went straight to the office. The building was locked after hours, so I used my key and went to my desk. The SD card from camera 3 was in my desk drawer where I had left it. I pulled it out and put it in my laptop. The footage was different. All those clips of me walking the trail, gone. Replaced with normal wildlife footage. Deer, rabbits, a fish or cat, a moose. Standard stuff. The continuous 11-hour file from November 1st was gone entirely. I checked the file properties, the metadata, everything. No evidence that it ever existed. I spent the next week trying to make sense of what happened. I went back to that clearing. Couldn't find it. The game trail, the dumped cameras, the pile of SD cards, none of it was there. I checked the archive room. All the SD cards I thought I'd seen in that pile were right where they should be, properly labeled and filed. I reviewed footage from camera 1 and camera 2. Normal. Nothing unusual. I asked Emma about November 4th. She confirmed I'd been at her place. She showed me photos she'd taken that night, me asleep on her couch, blue fleece jacket visible. But I still have that footage, the original file, backed up to a personal hard drive before it disappeared from the SD card. 147 clips of someone who looks exactly like me walking a trail I didn't walk during times I was somewhere else. I can't explain it. I've tried. Doppelganger, shared delusion, temporal anomaly, none of it makes sense. What I do know is this. I still maintain trail cameras across my patrol area. I still review footage every few weeks. And sometimes in the background of clips showing deer or bears or empty forest, I see a figure standing in the distance. Same dark jacket, same build, same face, always watching the camera, never moving, and the timestamps on those clips always match times when I was somewhere else, doing something else, living my normal life. I haven't told anyone at work. I haven't filed a report. What would I say? That I'm being followed by myself? That there are multiple versions of me walking the forest when I'm not there? They'd pull me off patrol. Mandatory psych eval. Desk duty until I recovered. So I keep quiet, I keep working, I keep deploying cameras and reviewing footage. But I don't go into that section of forest anymore. The area around camera 3 is marked as equipment malfunction zone on my patrol maps. Other officers avoid it now. And sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing footage, I wonder, what if I'm not the original? What if I'm one of the copies, walking my patrol, living my life, while the real Jack Mercer is still out there in that clearing, watching cameras record things he'll never review? What if we're all copies, and the originals are somewhere else, doing the same jobs, living the same lives, never knowing we exist? I don't have answers. Just footage I can't explain, and boot prints I can't deny. If you work in wildlife management or research, and you maintain trail cameras in remote areas, pay attention to your footage. Really look at it, not just at the animals. Check the backgrounds, check the edges of the frame, check for figures that shouldn't be there. And if you see yourself in footage from a time when you weren't in the field, don't go looking for explanations. Don't try to find where it was recorded. Don't follow the tracks, because you might find yourself. And when you do, you'll realize that one of you doesn't belong, and you'll never be certain which one that is. Story 5. Everyone on my crew is dead, and I'm the only one who remembers they existed. I'm sitting in a Colorado State Police interview room right now, looking at photos of people who supposedly never worked for Rocky Mountain Geological Survey. The detective across from me is asking why I filed missing persons reports for employees who don't appear in any company records. He's asking why I have equipment signed out to names that don't exist in any database. He's asking if I've been taking my medication. But 6 days ago, these people were alive. I worked with them. I knew their coffee orders, their hiking pace, their voices calling out coordinates across mountain valleys. Tyler Chen brought his dog to the field. Always. A border collie named Scout who could smell weather changes before they hit. Sarah Voss hummed while she worked. Classic rock, usually. Bad Company, Foreigner, stuff her dad played when she was a kid. James Okoro laughed at his own jokes before he finished telling them, this deep rumbling chuckle that started in his chest and made everyone else laugh before the punchline landed. Rebecca Santos took terrible field notes, on purpose, called them abstract impressionism whenever I complained, but her sample cataloging was flawless. I knew these people. I worked with them for 3 years. They were real. But according to every record, every file, every piece of documentation I can find, I've been working alone since I started at Rocky Mountain Geological Survey in March of 2020. Let me explain how this happened, how I lost 4 people who never existed. My name is Nathan Graves, 38 years old, senior field geologist for Rocky Mountain Geological Survey, a private consulting firm based in Boulder, Colorado. We do mineral exploration, groundwater studies, geotechnical assessments for construction projects, and environmental impact surveys. Good work, good pay, lots of time in the backcountry doing what I love. On November 7th, 2023, my crew was assigned to complete a mineral composition survey in the Maroon Bells Snowmass Wilderness, about 12 miles southwest of Aspen. The client was a mining company exploring potential rare earth element deposits in the area. Perfectly legal work, all the permits in order, strict environmental protocols. The survey required us to establish a base camp and spend 5 days collecting rock samples from specific geological formations at high altitude. We were looking at metamorphic contacts, areas where different rock types met and mineral concentrations could be high. My crew consisted of the 5 of us. Me, the senior geologist in charge of site selection and overall coordination. Tyler Chen, 29, our geophysics specialist and equipment manager. Ex-Army geospatial engineer, 3 years with the company. Sarah Voss, 32, geochemist. PhD from Colorado School of Mines, expert in spectroscopy and mineral analysis. James Okoro, 41, structural geologist from Nigeria, brought in as a contractor for this specific project because of his experience with similar formations in Africa. Rebecca Santos, 26, junior geologist fresh out of grad school, brilliant but still learning field protocols. We met at the Cathedral Lake trailhead at 6:45 a.m. on November 7th. Temperature was 31 degrees Fahrenheit, clear skies, light snow on the ground from a storm 2 days earlier. Perfect conditions for high-altitude work. I remember Tyler's truck pulling into the parking lot, Scout's face pressed against the back window, tail wagging. I remember Sarah complaining about the early start, nursing a huge travel mug of coffee. I remember James checking and rechecking the equipment list, making sure we hadn't forgotten anything. I remember Rebecca taking photos of the mountain views, posting them to Instagram before we lost cell service. We loaded our packs, survey equipment, camping gear, food for 5 days, sampling tools, GPS units, radios, first aid, everything we needed. Each pack weighed between 50 and 60 pounds. Scout carried his own pack with dog food and a collapsible water bowl. We started hiking at 7:23 a.m. The trail to our survey area was approximately 8 miles, climbing from 9,500 feet elevation to just over 12,000 feet. Steep, technical in places, but we were all experienced mountain hikers. Tyler and James set the pace in front. Sarah and Rebecca stayed in the middle. I brought up the rear, making sure nobody fell behind. We reached our planned base camp location at 1:37 p.m., a relatively flat area near a tree line with access to water from a small creek and good visibility of our target formations. The plan was to set up camp, do preliminary reconnaissance that afternoon, then spend the next 4 days collecting samples before hiking out on November 12th. We pitched 4 tents in a rough semicircle around a central area where we'd cook and organize equipment. Tyler and James shared one tent. Sarah and Rebecca shared another. I had my own. Scout had his own small tent that Tyler had bought as a joke, but Scout genuinely preferred. By 3 p.m., camp was established, and we started our initial survey work. We spread out across the slope above camp, each of us examining different rock exposures, taking preliminary samples, marking locations with GPS coordinates. The geology was fascinating. We were looking at the contact zone between Precambrian metamorphic basement rocks and younger sedimentary formations, exactly the kind of area where rare earth elements concentrate. The rocks showed clear evidence of hydrothermal alteration. Mineral-rich fluids had moved through the formations, depositing interesting chemistry. Sarah found the first really promising sample around 4:15 p.m., a piece of metamorphosed shale showing unusual coloration and weight that suggested heavy element concentration. She called me over on the radio. "Nathan, you need to see this. I'm getting readings that don't make sense." I climbed up to her position, maybe 200 yards above camp. She was crouched next to a small outcrop, portable spectrometer in hand, frowning at the readout. "What's wrong?" I asked. "The signature is weird. I'm getting peaks for elements that shouldn't be here. Look." She handed me the spectrometer. I looked at the display. She was right. The spectral analysis showed concentrations of thorium, uranium, and several rare earth elements, way higher than expected for this formation. Not dangerous levels, but geologically unusual. "Could be localized enrichment," I said. "We'll need more samples to establish a pattern. Mark this spot, and we'll come back tomorrow with the full sampling kit." Sarah nodded and pulled out a roll of flagging tape to mark the outcrop. That's when Scout started barking. Not his normal bark. A continuous, frantic sound, the kind of alarm bark that meant something was very wrong. We looked down toward camp. Scout was at the edge of our tent circle, staring into the forest below treeline, hackles raised, barking nonstop. Tyler was trying to calm him. "Scout, heel. Scout, quiet." But Scout wouldn't stop. He backed away from the forest, still barking, then turned and ran straight up the slope toward us. "What's got him spooked?" Sarah asked. "I don't know. Let's head back down." We descended the camp. Tyler had Scout by the collar now, and the dog was still agitated, whining and pulling toward higher ground. "He won't settle," Tyler said. "Something's got him freaked out. Never seen him like this." James emerged from his tent holding a radio. "Anyone else getting weird interference?" I pulled out my radio and keyed the transmit button. Instead of the normal static, I got a low-frequency hum, pulsing rhythmically. "That's not normal," Rebecca said. She'd walked over from where she'd been cataloging samples. "That's not radio interference. I don't know what that is." We stood there listening to the strange hum coming from all our radios. It rose and fell in intensity, almost like breathing. Then it stopped. Complete silence. Even Scout went quiet. Equipment malfunction? Sarah suggested. Maybe the altitude or the hum came back, but not from the radios, from the ground. We could feel it through our boots, a deep vibration, subsonic, making our teeth ache and our vision blur slightly. Earthquake? Rebecca asked, but her voice was uncertain. I've felt earthquakes. This wasn't that. Earthquakes are chaotic, random shaking. This was rhythmic, pulsing, almost mechanical. The vibration lasted maybe 30 seconds, then stopped as suddenly as it started. We looked at each other. Nobody said anything for a long moment. We should document this, I said finally. Whatever it was, it's unusual. Could be related to the mineral deposits. Piezoelectric effects, maybe, or we should pack up and leave, Tyler said. Scout's never wrong about danger. If he thinks we need to go, we should go. We just got here, James said. We have 5 days of work to complete. We can't leave because a dog got scared. Scout doesn't get scared for no reason. Tyler, I respect that, but the hum started again. Louder this time. The vibration made small rocks bounce and skip across the ground. Scout bolted, running straight up the slope away from camp. Scout! Tyler ran after him. The rest of us stood frozen, feeling that impossible vibration coming from deep underground. It built in intensity until I thought my bones might shake apart, then cut off completely. Silence, Tyler's voice from upslope. Nathan, get up here. We climbed. Tyler was maybe 300 yards above camp, standing next to a large boulder. Scout sat beside him, quiet now but still tense. Look at this, Tyler said, pointing at the ground. There was a crack, a fresh fissure in the bedrock, maybe 6 inches wide, running in a perfectly straight line across the slope. I could see down into it maybe 2 feet before it narrowed to nothing. This wasn't here before, Tyler said. I walked right past this spot an hour ago. This is new. I knelt and examined the crack. The edges were sharp, fresh, showing no weathering, and it was too straight. Fractures in rock follow weaknesses in the mineral structure. They zigzag branch, follow irregular paths. This was a perfectly straight line, laser precise, running northeast to southwest for as far as I could see. What could cause this? Rebecca asked. Nothing natural, I said. Thermal expansion maybe, but that would be gradual. This looks instantaneous. Sarah was walking along the crack, following it upslope. It goes for at least 100 yards, maybe more. I can't see where it ends. James was examining the rock on either side of the crack. The displacement is uniform. Both sides dropped equally. He paused. That's not how fractures work. One side should drop more than the other. We spent the next hour documenting the crack with photos, measurements, GPS coordinates. None of it made geological sense. The crack shouldn't exist, and if it did exist, it shouldn't look like this. By the time we finished, it was getting dark. We returned to camp and made dinner freeze-dried meals heated with boiling water. Standard backpacking fare. The conversation was subdued. Everyone was thinking about the vibrations, the crack, Scout's behavior. I vote we complete tomorrow's sampling and reassess, I said. If we get more vibrations or other unusual phenomena, we pack up and report back. But we're here, we're set up, and the client needs this data. Everyone agreed, though Tyler looked unhappy about it. We turned in around 8 p.m. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to the wind and the distant sounds of my crew settling into their tents. Sarah was humming something Fleetwood Mac, I think. James was snoring softly. Tyler was talking quietly to Scout. Normal sounds. Comfortable sounds. I fell asleep around 9 p.m. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to complete silence. Not normal mountain silence. Absolute silence. No wind. No distant animal sounds. No breathing from nearby tents. Nothing. I sat up and grabbed my headlamp, switched it on, and unzipped my tent. The beam of my headlamp cut through darkness that felt wrong. Too thick. Too still. Tyler, I called out. James, anyone awake? No response. I climbed out of my tent fully. The other tents were dark, zipped shut. I walked to Tyler and James's tent and tapped the side. Tyler, you guys okay? Nothing. I unzipped their tent and shone my light inside. Empty. Both sleeping bags were there, still arranged, like someone was sleeping in them, but flattened. No Tyler, no James, no Scout. I went to Sarah and Rebecca's tent. Same thing. Empty sleeping bags arranged perfectly, but nobody inside. My heart was pounding now. I swept my headlamp across the camp. All the gear was there. The cooking equipment, the survey tools, the sample bags, everything except the people. Tyler, Sarah, James, Rebecca, I shouted into the darkness. Nothing. Not even an echo. I grabbed my radio. Anyone on this frequency, please respond. That pulsing hum again, but nothing else. I made a decision. I'd hike down to the trailhead, get cell service, call for search and rescue. My crew was missing, and I needed help. I packed quickly, essentials only, headlamp, GPS, radio, water, first aid kit. I left the tent standing, left most of the gear. I just needed to get down and get help. I started hiking at 2:43 a.m. The trail should have been straightforward. I'd hiked it 12 hours earlier, 8 miles, mostly downhill, following a well-marked path. But the trail was wrong. Landmarks I remembered from the hike up weren't there. A distinctive dead tree that had been right beside the trail gone. A creek crossing that should have appeared after a mile not there. The trail itself seemed narrower, overgrown, like it hadn't been maintained in years. I checked my GPS. It showed me on the correct trail, descending at the correct bearing, but what I was seeing didn't match. After what felt like 2 hours of hiking, I checked my watch. 2:51 a.m. Only 8 minutes had passed. That's impossible. I had been walking for at least 2 hours. I'd covered miles. I'd descended hundreds of vertical feet. But my watch insisted only 8 minutes had elapsed. I kept hiking. The GPS showed steady progress. The elevation reading was dropping, but the trail kept changing, kept looking wrong. At 3:04 a.m., by my watch, which insisted only 21 minutes had passed since I left camp, I reached what should have been the trailhead. The parking lot was gone. Not empty. Gone. Where there should have been a paved lot with space for 20 vehicles, there was just forest. Old forest, with trees that looked like they'd been growing undisturbed for decades. My truck wasn't there. Nobody's vehicle was there. Just trees and undergrowth, and a Forest Service sign so weathered I could barely read it. I pulled out my phone. No service, as expected at this elevation, but I could check the GPS. It showed me at the exact coordinates of the Cathedral Lake trailhead. But the trailhead didn't exist anymore. I sat down on what should have been asphalt and tried to think. My crew was missing. The trail had changed. The parking lot had vanished. My watch was running wrong. None of this made sense. I decided to hike down the access road. It was another 4 miles to the highway. If I could reach the highway, I could flag down a car, get to a phone, call for help. I started walking down the road. Except it wasn't really a road anymore. It was overgrown, barely visible, more like a game trail than a Forest Service road. But my GPS insisted I was on Road 317, heading north toward Highway 133. I walked for what felt like hours. The sky never got lighter. It stayed that deep, dead black of mountain night. No stars, no moon, nothing. My watch said 3:47 a.m. 43 minutes since I left camp. But I'd been walking for at least 4 hours. I knew I had. My legs were tired. My feet hurt. I had drunk half my water. The highway appeared suddenly, materializing out of the darkness like someone had switched it on. 1 second forest. The next second paved road, yellow center line, everything normal. I stood on the shoulder, breathing hard, staring at this impossible road that hadn't been there a moment before. A car appeared, headlights cutting through the darkness, engine noise breaking the silence. A Colorado State Patrol cruiser. I stepped into the road, waving my arms. The cruiser pulled over. A trooper got out, hand near his weapon, looking at me with obvious concern. "Sir, are you all right? What are you doing out here?" "I need help. My crew is missing. We were doing geological survey work in the wilderness, and they disappeared, and the trail changed, and—" "Slow down, sir. What crew? What survey work?" "Rocky Mountain Geological Survey. We had a permit for the Maroon Bells area. 5 of us. They're gone. I need search and rescue. The trooper was looking at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Sir, I need you to take a breath. You're alone. There's nobody else around. Are you injured? Have you been drinking? I'm not alone. There are 4 other people. Tyler Chen, Sarah Voss, James Okoro, Rebecca Santos. We were camped at 12,000 feet. They vanished from their tents. Okay. And when did this happen? Tonight. A few hours ago. I don't know exactly. My watch is malfunctioning. Please, you need to send help. The trooper pulled out a radio. Dispatch. This is Unit 47. I've got a disoriented hiker on Highway 133, mile marker 23, requesting medical response and a welfare check. I'm not disoriented. My crew is missing. What's your name, sir? Nathan Graves. And you work for Rocky Mountain Geological Survey? Yes. We've been contracted by Apex Mining for a rare earth elements survey in the wilderness area. The trooper was writing in a notepad. And your crew members, can you describe them? I described each person. Names, ages, physical descriptions, roles on the team. The trooper listened, taking notes, his expression growing more concerned. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me to the station. We'll sort this out there. Get you warm, make some calls. I don't need to go to the station. I need you to send search and rescue to our camp. We will. Absolutely. But first, let's get you somewhere safe and figure out exactly what's going on. The trooper drove me to the Pitkin County Sheriff's Office in Aspen. It was 4:36 a.m. when we arrived still, according to my watch, which had apparently only advanced 49 minutes since I left camp. Inside, they sat me down in an interview room and brought me coffee. A detective arrived. Detective Martinez, mid-40s, professional and patient. She asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I told her about the survey, the crew, the camp, the vibrations, the crack in the rock, waking up to find everyone gone, the changed trail, the vanished parking lot. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Mr. Graves, I'm going to be direct with you. We've contacted Rocky Mountain Geological Survey. According to their records, you're the only geologist they have working in the Maroon Bells area. There's no crew. There's no permit for 5 people. Just you. Solo survey work. That's wrong. There are 5 of us. I have the permit paperwork in my truck. I have photos of the crew. Your truck is registered to you personally. It's parked at your apartment in Boulder. It hasn't moved in 3 days. No. My truck is at the Cathedral Lake trailhead. Or it was. It disappeared. With the parking lot, Martinez pulled out a folder. These are the employment records from Rocky Mountain Geological Survey. They show you've been working alone since you started with the company in March of 2020. She spread out documents on the table. Payroll records showing only my name. Equipment logs showing gear signed out to me only. Project reports authored by me, with no other contributors. That's impossible. Tyler, Sarah, James, Rebecca, they've been with the company for years. I didn't start until 2020. Tyler was already there when I joined. Mr. Graves, we ran the names you gave us. Tyler Chen, Sarah Voss, James Okoro, Rebecca Santos. None of them exist in any database. No driver's licenses, no social security numbers, no employment history, nothing. They exist. I worked with them. I know them. Do you have photos? Contact information? Anything that proves they're real? I pulled out my phone, opened the Photos app, scrolled to November 7th, this morning, when Rebecca had been taking pictures at the trailhead. The photos were there, but they were different. Rebecca's selfie, with the mountains in the background. The mountains were there, but Rebecca wasn't. Just an empty shot of the scenery. The group photo Tyler had taken of all of us before we started hiking it showed me. Solo. Nobody else in frame. I scrolled frantically through my photos. Hundreds of field photos from the past 3 years. Every single one that should have shown my crew members showed empty space. Equipment floating in midair where someone should have been holding it. My arm around nothing. This isn't right, I whispered. They were in these photos. I saw them. I took these pictures with them in them. Martinez's expression was sympathetic but firm. Mr. Graves, when's the last time you saw a doctor? I don't need a doctor. I need you to search for my crew. We're going to send a team to check the area you described. But Mr. Graves, I think you need to consider the possibility that you've been working alone, and the stress of solo field work at high altitude may have caused some confusion. I'm not confused. 4 people are missing. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. The photos didn't lie. The employment records didn't lie. Why would Rocky Mountain Geological Survey deny having employees who worked for them? Unless they never existed. Unless I made them up. No, that's insane. You can't hallucinate 4 distinct people with full personalities, histories, skills. You can't have detailed conversations with figments of your imagination. Can you? Martinez, let me make calls. I called my supervisor at Rocky Mountain Geological Survey. Nathan, what's wrong? Are you okay? Frank, I need you to confirm my crew roster for the Maroon Bells survey. Crew roster? Nathan, you're solo on that project. You specifically requested to work alone. No. Tyler Chen, Sarah Voss, James Okoro, Rebecca Santos. They're all on this survey with me. Silence. Then, Nathan, I don't know those names. Are they contractors? Because we didn't authorize any contractors for this job. Tyler's been with us for 3 years. He's our geophysics specialist. Nathan, we don't have a geophysics specialist. Our geophysics work is contracted to outside firms. You know that. I hung up, called Tyler's cell phone. The number I'd called dozens of times over the past 3 years. The number you have dialed is not in service. Sarah's number. Same message. James's number. Same message. Rebecca's number. Same message. I sat there in the interview room, staring at my phone, and felt reality sliding away. Search and rescue went to the coordinates I provided. They found the camp, 1 tent, my tent, 1 sleeping bag, 1 backpack, survey equipment for 1 person. No sign anyone else had been there. They found the crack in the rock, photographed it, measured it, brought the data back to geologists at the University of Colorado. The geologists confirmed it was unusual, but offered a technical explanation involving differential thermal expansion and localized tectonic stress. Rare, but possible. No vibrations were detected, no unusual seismic activity in the area. I was held for 72 hours for psychiatric evaluation. The doctors were kind. They explained that high-altitude cerebral edema can cause hallucinations, confusion, false memories. They explained that prolonged isolation can trigger psychotic episodes in even mentally healthy individuals. They prescribed medication, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers. They released me with a recommendation for ongoing therapy. Rocky Mountain Geological Survey put me on indefinite leave. Paid, supportive, but clear that I couldn't return to field work until I was stabilized. That was 6 days ago. I'm home now, in my apartment in Boulder, surrounded by evidence that I've been working alone for 3.5 years. But I have other evidence too. I have Tyler's coffee mug, the one he left in my truck after our last survey in October. It's on my kitchen counter right now. Blue ceramic, chipped handle, University of Colorado logo. I called the University of Colorado. Tyler Chen never attended. Nobody by that name in their alumni database. But the mug is real. I'm holding it. It exists. I have a book Sarah lent me, Geochemistry of Hydrothermal Ore Deposits. Her name is written inside the front cover in her handwriting. Property of Sarah Voss. Please return. But Sarah Voss doesn't exist. Never existed. The book is real, though. I'm looking at the handwriting right now. I have Scout's dog tag, the one that fell off his collar during a survey in August. Tyler was going to get it fixed, but I found it later and forgot to give it back. It's engraved. Scout, if found, please call Tyler Chen, followed by a phone number that's now disconnected. I have Rebecca's field notebook, the one with the abstract impressionism notes that drove me crazy. She left it in my truck last month. I kept meaning to return it. It's filled with her handwriting, her drawings, her terrible jokes in the margins. I have photos that should show my crew, but don't. I have their personal items that shouldn't exist. I have memories of conversations, shared meals, 3 years of field work together. And I have nobody who believes me. The official explanation is that I created elaborate false memories to cope with isolation, that I purchased these items myself to support my delusions, that the stress of solo field work triggered a psychotic break. Maybe they're right, maybe I am insane, but I don't think so. I think something happened on that mountain, something related to the vibrations, the crack, the way the trail changed, something that removed my crew from existence and left me as the only one who remembers they were real. I've been researching. There are stories dismissed as folklore, urban legends, conspiracy theories about places where reality is thin, where the boundaries between what is and what isn't can blur, where people can slip from one version of the world to another. Most of the stories are nonsense, but some of them mention specific warning signs. Unexplained vibrations from underground, check. Geometric cracks appearing in bedrock, check. Time distortions, watches running wrong, subjective time not matching objective time, check. And the most consistent warning across all the stories: if you see the same landscape but something is missing, something that should be there, a building, a road, a person, you've slipped between versions of reality. And you might not be able to slip back. I think I slipped. I think on that mountain, in those hours between 2:17 a.m. when I woke up and 4:36 a.m. when the trooper picked me up, I moved from a version of reality where Tyler, Sarah, James, and Rebecca existed to a version where they never did. But I brought evidence with me, physical objects that shouldn't exist in this version, proof that I'm not crazy, that they were real. I'm going back. The doctors say I shouldn't. My supervisor says I can't. Everyone who cares about me says it's dangerous, that I need to accept what happened and move forward. But they're wrong. My crew is still out there, somewhere, in some version of reality where they exist, and I'm the one who vanished. And if I can slip between versions once, I can do it again. I leave tomorrow, November 14th, 2023. I'm hiking back to that camp, back to that crack in the rock. I'm bringing the items they left behind. Maybe they'll act as anchors, help me find the right version of reality. Maybe I'll find them. Maybe they're looking for me too, wondering why I disappeared, why search and rescue never came. Or maybe I'll disappear completely, slip into a version of reality where I never existed at all. But I have to try, because the alternative is accepting that 4 people I knew, people I cared about, people I worked alongside for years, never existed outside my own mind. And I can't accept that. I won't. If you work in remote areas and you notice something is wrong, landscapes changing, people disappearing, time running incorrectly, pay attention to what's missing, not what's there. The presence of unusual things is obvious. Everyone notices when something new appears. But absence is subtle. It's the person who should be in the photo but isn't. The conversation you remember having with someone nobody else remembers meeting. The evidence of lives that officially never existed. If you find yourself surrounded by absence, by gaps where people should be, don't let anyone convince you it's all in your head. Trust your memory. Trust your evidence. Trust the coffee mug and the dog tag and the notebook that shouldn't exist. And if you have the courage, go looking for what's missing. Because somewhere in some version of reality, they're looking for you too. I'm leaving at dawn. I'll post an update when I get back, if I get back. And that's our 5th story. 5 tales from the edges of reality, where forests and mountains and empty highways swallow people whole, where your own voice echoes back from impossible sources, where crews vanish and trails loop, and cameras record things that never happened. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. These stories about lookout towers and survey work and long-haul routes and trail cameras and geological crews, they all share something. They're about isolation, about being alone with something that shouldn't exist, about the moment you realize the world doesn't work the way you thought it did. If you enjoyed these stories, let me know in the comments. Tell me which one got under your skin the deepest. And if you work in remote places, if you spend time alone in the wilderness or on empty highways, maybe keep these warnings in mind. Because the forest doesn't care if you believe. The mountain doesn't need your permission. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and something impossible is the choice to keep walking forward instead of turning back. Stay safe out there, And remember, if something feels wrong, it probably